Am.
With Gillette, your most supported our frontline workers this Movember.
And we're back. It's 7:30 this Thursday morning, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. A unified studio for the first time in 7 months, is it? Welcome back, Eoin.
The border is open, a unified studio indeed.
Or else you've just downloaded one of those Zoom backgrounds and we're cheating and it makes it look like you're still in Kerry, actually. That's what's going on here, isn't it?
It's the exact same quality of picture that I would have had. I never actually watched my picture back in Kerry.
Not good, don't worry.
Out of fear almost more than anything else. Let's not see what the internet connection's like.
Well, good of Manchester United to kick off the morning this morning, and we've got plenty to talk about with the Ireland rugby team as well. But for Manchester United to now exist in purgatory, this potential for them to go on a cycle this was the boom cycle, it's been slightly aborted by what happened last night.
Does the bust come after the boom bust cycle just gets more and more rapid, would be my question. Is there a defeat that comes before a big win potentially this weekend, and then, I don't know, maybe another big win against Leipzig to qualify for the knockout stages of the Champions League, and then actually getting knocked out in the last 16 is what's going to happen very predictably? I don't know. It's like, it is a little bit more random than perhaps it used to be. It was almost like clockwork where it was every second game. I think some of the busts are getting longer, some of the booms are getting longer, and last night, albeit up against a quality team, you saw some maybe individual performances from the likes of Fred showing that, hold on a minute, you can't predict what anybody's going to do here. And I know that he hasn't been amazing the last couple of weeks, but outside of Bruno Fernandes, he has been one of the best performers for Manchester United under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. So there's just a lack of predictability about everybody in that team right now, with the exception of, say, Fernandes, who has clearly been their best player.
Do you blame Ole Gunnar Solskjaer for Fred getting sent off?
Do I blame Solskjaer for that?
Yes.
I don't, no. I don't blame a manager for a player going crazy on the pitch, for letting a rush of blood to the head occur, for that tackle in the second half, which Solskjaer himself said wasn't a yellow card. Solskjaer himself said today that he actually had a word with Fred at half-time and said to him that, you know, you need to cool the jets a little bit. I'm not going to take you off, but you need to calm down a little bit and you'll be okay. And that's what he had, and Fred probably thought that he was okay with that challenge that ended up seeing him get taken off anyway. You can make the case that the manager should take the player out of the firing line, but I don't know, at what point do you start punishing your player for showing a little bit of too much passion? Like, of course he was over the edge. Of course he was over the edge. But appreciate the fact that he was flirting with the edge in the first place. Just rein him in a little bit, but let him go crazy in a legal way.
But reining him in is taking him off at half time, right? That's the thing that makes the most sense. Is like, okay, we love your ability to somehow scuttle away from a 3-match ban for that red card that you should have got for headbutting somebody, which we all saw, which went to VAR, which is mad that wasn't actually a red card. Like, I mean, that's kind of the first story for me. And the second one then has to be, just take him off, take him out. Like, you're going to need him in the final group stage game. Now you don't have him. And you're going to have to go back to Pogba, who, let's face it, you don't really want to play anymore. And we all know that because you're not picking him.
Well, it doesn't need to be Pogba, is the thing.
Could be Van de Beek, who you didn't sign.
It could be Van de Beek, who had clearly forged a partnership with Fred, and it's going to have to be Matic maybe in the last game, where that actually kind of works.
What's the...
You're gesticulating wildly there. What's the issue with Van de Beek?
Well, I just can't see them being happy that they're now playing that game without Fred. I don't think that any of those players who they didn't pick last night for the game are like-for-like replacements. Matic is like slower, less mobile these days. And I don't know, you just seem to think like it was one of those telegraphed red cards that happen so often where a manager just can't see it and the rest of the world is watching. They should take that guy off because he's going to get sent off. He's doing enough here, and if he doesn't, it's going to be a miracle. And you're riding your luck as opposed to riding your managerial acumen. It sounds a bit filthy, but anyway, you know what I mean.
I see what you mean, but I also think that if you have a player out there who is showing that level of aggression, I think that there is positives to be channeled from that. And if you as the manager have a conversation with him at half-time, you've survived. You would have thought that you rode it out. You rode out the part of the match where he is in jeopardy of getting sent off. As a manager, you believe that you have a conversation with the player at half-time, and you believe from what you're getting back that this is going to be okay. And in fairness, Solskjaer this morning is thinking to himself, well, actually, we're a bit unfortunate with that second yellow card. What's probably really happened is that the referee has realised that he's completely screwed up with the VAR call in the first half, and is just looking for one little inkling to send Fred off. And now the VAR call was a disaster.
Yes.
How on earth can he get that wrong?
So is that not also in the manager's head? Not that we're riding our luck here, it's that actually they're going to try and get you now. So we're going to give you 10 minutes max, and then we're taking you off. So it doesn't look like we punishment substitute. We love you, you're brilliant, you're important to us, but we've got Pogba and Van de Beek on the bench if we need them. Look, we can come back to this because Andy Mitten is going to be joining us in about 10 minutes' time. I think Manchester United are in managerial purgatory at the minute. That's my thesis this morning, is that they need to do something. Something has to happen because, you know, when you're stuck in purgatory, it's either heaven or hell or nothing. It's just an endless cycle of nothingness. And that's what the Man United fans are facing at the moment. We are also going to talk with Tom English a little bit later on about Celtic, who are in action this evening against Milan. So they're at Milan, and that's a 5-6 kickoff. And Neil Lennon has, in the build-up to the game, said, "Yeah, I can see how I could have been sacked by now. I can see that." I wonder, are like the powers that be, the Peter Laurel and Dermot Desmond gone, maybe we... What did you say there, Neil? You think maybe you could have been sacked? Maybe? Are they looking at that going, okay, maybe we should have sacked him? I don't know. It strikes me that they're not really the sacking type. That's not been their history. Like, it just hasn't been how they've done business up to this point. So I'm very interested to see what happens in that. But we're also going to talk with Tom English about rugby, so we'll get to him just after 8 o'clock this morning. And suddenly the Ireland-Scotland game has quite a lot riding on it for this nothing end-of-season scratch tournament that's replacing the normal November internationals. We'd normally be playing in the last week of these, if we were still playing a match, it'd be against a Tier 2 nation. We'd be sticking 40 points on them. Everybody would be like, oh, this was a great window where we lost to the All Blacks and beat the Springboks or the Australians, and happy days. And, you know, in normal times, but it's not. It's like suddenly Ireland against Scotland had a lot riding on it in an empty Aviva.
It's interesting that Nucifora didn't do his State of the Union address after the Scotland game, probably knowing that there was one more game. He actually rounded off the year before this. There's definitely a feel that whatever happens this weekend is going to either sour what way we talk about the national team over the next few months, or does the opposite to that entirely. That I think we've started to think about how we're going to talk about 2020 as a whole on this show, and what's the rugby story of the year, what is the tone of the year, what is Andy Farrell's first year being like. You get the feeling that how it's going to be spoken about over the next few months is largely riding on how they get on against Scotland this weekend. They're a nation at a fairly similar level to Ireland at the moment. I would have thought, like you were saying before the show, that the spread is, what, 9 points at the weekend?
Yeah, seems ridiculous to me.
That win over Wales a few weeks ago obviously showed that they're in a better place than Wales, needless to say. We obviously, as a rugby nation, have kind of struggled to find a little bit of identity this year, whereas the only sort of glimmer of hope we've got is also by beating Wales this year, who are in a massive state of transition. And like, I don't think transition is a dirty word. I think that Ireland have probably struggled to find their proper transition this year and actually find what this new direction they're going to go in is. I don't think they have a new direction to go in. I think that it has been very much Schmidt's B-side, basically, is what we've seen for a lot of this year. And how will that go against the Scotland team? Well, I mean, it'll just be a less comfortable win against Scotland. That's how it should go. But it'll be in the balance, and it'll be a situation where if Ireland mess up on a crucial set piece, for example, which they've been prone to doing, they could get beaten at the weekend. And if you're going into the winter as a new Ireland coach, relatively new Ireland head coach, and you've got beaten by Scotland in your last game, I think that changes the entire complexion of the year. Because I think there has at the moment been a debate about, is this glass half full or is this glass half empty? There is very divergent opinions on Ireland's year so far as a rugby, in terms of their rugby performances. I think this weekend almost settles it.
I haven't seen too many people say it's half full. I've definitely been reading a lot of glass half empty stuff.
What you mean, like Joe Schmidt should still be Ireland manager? Is that the Ireland head coach? Is that the sort of glass half empty stuff you're referring to?
That seems like an emptier glass than a fuller glass to me.
It certainly does. I think that it's actually, when I mean the glass half full, I mean the discourse around it being a wait-and-see approach. That's right, actually, let's actually wait until next year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the only right thing to do is to give Andy Farrell the opportunity to have a normal existence where he can wander around and hang out at Ulster training and hang out at Connacht training and hang out at Munster training for a week and see what's going on, which you can't do at the moment because everybody's in bubbles. The UK have obviously approved our vaccine. So if it works, I mean, great, that's great. And if it doesn't, then at least there's a giant human experiment going on our doorstep that we can be privy to the results. But that's coming, right? So he's going to get a normal life and a normal existence. And I think you have to take into account that this has been a very disrupted year. And so his philosophy still hasn't come through. If I was advising them on any kind of PR basis, you'd be like, explain what your philosophy is and what you're trying to do in more detail. Lay it out for us so that the lay fan can watch it and go, I can see what Ireland are trying to do here. And this is the patterns of play that they're trying to get in, and this is the reason why they're picking the players that they're picking. And just explain it to everybody. Yeah,
I do think, though, that if you're going to wander around, if you want to, and actually try different things out, this is the year to do it. This has been the year to do it. That was the year to do it. And if you've got Brian O'Driscoll and Keith Wood on Monday Night Rugby, 10 days ago, saying they can't identify the Irish style of play, then that has to be an immediate red flag. Like, there will be immediate comparisons between, the two head coaches and managers of the two biggest national sports teams we have here in Stephen Kenny and Andy Farrell. In one team, you've got slightly better results, which is the rugby team, but a non-discernible style of play. Whereas on the football side, you've got a very discernible style of play, but no results to show for it. And there's been personnel excuses to make for that, which are legitimate excuses. Which side of the fence would you rather be on? The guy with no plan and decent results, or the guy with a plan and no results and no luck? You probably want to be the guy with the plan, because that actually suggests more sustainability. Now, I think maybe we're a little bit too harsh to rush to bash Andy Farrell because of the fact that it's like, this guy's been around for years and years and years. No, the head coach job is very different.
It is.
And maybe we should be giving him a clean start from this year rather than judging him on past failings or maybe past disappointments under Schmidt.
Yeah, okay. 7:42 this morning here on OTB Am. Here's what's coming up. Going to get to Andy Mitten in just 1 second. We're talking about GAA hype with John Duggan. In the absence of hype this year, does it make it easier for the underdogs? That's the question. Bring it through the sports pages at 8:20. At 8:35 this morning, Gordon Darcy is going to join us to help tell you about a new initiative that the IRFU Charitable Trust have for their injured players. Tom English is going to join us just after 9 o'clock to talk Celtic. Donn McClean at 9:20 talking about a new kids book just in time for Christmas. Matt Williams in blistering form on Wednesday Night Rugby. So that's coming your way from 9:30 this morning. If you want to get in touch, we'd love to hear from you. 087 9 180 180. I'm delighted to say Andy Mitten is with us. Andy, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Good morning. Okay. It's the morning after an excellent game of football at Old Trafford. Disappointing from Manchester United's perspective, but let's be realistic. Paris Saint-Germain are a better team than Manchester United. They always had that in them to come. I didn't expect them to be quite so dominant at the start of the game, and United were getting schooled for that first 25 minutes, but fair play, United came back into it. They played some really, really good football, and at the point where United equalised, the point where PSG went ahead, United were the better team. Fred is a talking point. He was lucky to stay on the pitch after he was booked in the first half for head contact against Leandro Paredes. I interviewed Paredes in Lisbon in August, and I only wish he'd shown the same level of enthusiasm when I spoke to him. But he showed him on the pitch at Old Trafford. But Paredes actually means wall in Spanish, and it was like talking to a wall when I spoke to him in August. It was the day before the Champions League final. I did loads of research into him. I thought, he's going to have some chemistry. He's going to find it funny that I speak Spanish and want to know what's going on here. But no, there was absolutely nothing there. But then a day later, I spoke to Ander Herrera and got a really good interview when he swore twice on the television station I was working for.
Very good. Fred is a talking point, right? The Manchester United fans in our life were like, you've got to ask Andy, what the hell was Solskjaer doing not taking him off? It was clear as day that he was going to get sent off. It was a sending off in slow motion was how Tommy described it to us this morning. Do you agree? And is that like just one of those things that Solskjaer needs to get the experience of, get to grip with, or is it just a blind spot that he had?
Well, I'll try and offer some insight because I totally get where everyone's coming from, and I was saying exactly the same things last night. And even Ole Gunnar admitted that he should have made that change. From his perspective, and I know what's going on inside there, they didn't feel that they had a player who they could bring on for Fred with the pace to go up against an extremely fast PSG team. So the point was, and I asked, why wasn't Matic brought on? And they felt that over 5 yards, Matic would keep being done. So looking at the bigger picture, this is a manager who feels that he still needs to strengthen, he still needs better players in there. I can see that point of view, but that's wrapped in shrouding the emotion of disappointment and just wanting to scream at Fred, because he is a good player, but he's been very frustrating in a couple of games recently. He was exceptionally poor against Arsenal. Then he's been one of the best players in other big matches. But if you survive getting sent off as he did, then maybe you should be cute enough to know that if the referee's not got it in for you, then the PSG players have as well. And he went to ground on that challenge, which led to his second yellow card. And maybe that was harsh, but there was another challenge against Paredes, obviously, in the first half, where Fred was potentially lucky not to get a caution as well. But it killed the game in the same way that when Nani was sent off at Old Trafford against Real Madrid in 2013. Not quite as dramatic, because it doesn't mean Manchester United are eliminated. But yeah, I take the point, and I think Ollie should have made the change. But that's viewed in hindsight. If Fred would have scored a screamer, then no one would have been saying that, but of course he didn't.
I'm not sure if Solskjaer is leaving him on to score a screamer at the end of the day. With Matic, though, it's an interesting point you make that he's going to get beaten over 5 yards. I imagine there's pretty much every Premier League team that you come up against at the moment is going to be of a similar-ish standard when it comes to pace. And if the Manny Matic isn't good enough because of his pace in Champions League level, there's probably going to be serious questions over his availability in big Premier League games as well. And I guess that points to the urgency that Manchester United still need to attack the transfer market with, if that is the state of their midfield in their view.
Yeah, some good points, and maybe my point about Fred scoring a screamer was way of the mark, because of course he doesn't score goals in football matches. I think PSG are faster than anything in the Premier League, and especially Mbappe. We saw that at Old Trafford last year when he just stole ahead and scored the goal, and we saw it again with him and Neymar combining. He's just got them burners on his feet, and he's just way too quick, but also their speed of passing. Matic isn't finished. He's had some very good games in 2020. In February and March before lockdown, he was one of the best players in the team. He can bring balance to the team, but there's not a lot left in the tank. And it does bring back to your point about strengthening the team. Manchester United should not be feeling that there's a lack of options in central midfield. And midfield is an issue, because you've almost got too many players, but the manager's not really struck on his preferred formation. He likes his 4-2-3-1. He's tried with a diamond, and he's tried the 3-5-2 or 5-3-2, call it what you will, but there's not really a standout, this is Manchester United's best 11. And you have been able to say that with some of Manchester United's greatest sides. I spoke yesterday to Dennis Eoin, and Dennis doesn't do a lot of media, and that's his choice, but he speaks really well. And he said about the 94 team, he said, you knew who the 11 were. And he's right. And it changed a little bit by 99 because of injuries, because football had changed, because you needed far bigger squads. And that's still true. You couldn't be playing the same 11 now with the intensity of the season, with the game weekend, midweek, right the way through, and even more intense over Christmas. But would United have been better with a world-class midfielder in there? Yeah, they would. I think that's a fair point. And it just shows Ollie still wants to bring players in. And the players that he has brought in, I think they've done pretty well. But he needs more time.
Did Dennis Irwin give a sense of what he would pick as Manchester United's back four?
Well, I spoke to Dennis in the day before the game, and I like him a lot, and he just doesn't do a lot of media, so I probably spoke to him less than all the lads in that treble winning team. And he's a quiet man. He just likes to go and have a pint in the pub when the pubs are open, and he thinks about football. But he wasn't saying what his best current defence was. What he was saying was the role of fullback has changed completely from when he played, and fullbacks are now expected to cross the ball all the time and be brilliant crosses of the ball. And the best example of that is probably Liverpool with the two world-class fullbacks. Have Manchester United got them? Not really. Wan-Bissaka is a decent player, but he's not as good going forward as some of the best fullbacks in the world. And then you've got Alex Telles and Luke Shaw. They're both good players. Alex Telles has had a pretty decent month, but when you're playing against the absolute cream, then you're going to get caught out. And that's what happened against PSG. They're a better team than Manchester United. They one of the best teams in the world. They reached the Champions League final in August, and Manchester United is still a team in transition. But went into that game with 4 straight wins. The mood was good. You sort of think, okay, back at Old Trafford, but what does that even mean? There's no home advantage at the moment. United have won both the games in Paris, and PSG have won both the games in Manchester with and without crowds. So it pushes on to the game in Leipzig next week. I said when I last spoke to you, I still thought it'd be really difficult for Manchester United to qualify, and I still do. But I still think they will do. But it's going to take some swing from Leipzig to go from conceding 5 to beating Manchester United. But as with last night, United cannot go to such a good team as RB and try and contain them and go for a draw, because we're heading for another Wolfsburg and going out of the Champions League in Germany if that happens.
Yeah, the team, Manchester United, just aren't good enough at the moment to go and guarantee a draw. They don't just have the defensive solidity to be able to do that, do they?
No, they don't at all. And I think that the coaches realise that, and they don't expect to win the league this year. That's reflected in the odds when you look at where Manchester United are in the league table. I do think there's been improvement. With Leipzig, they were in a better position when they came to Old Trafford. Obviously, they've been scouted extensively, and United see a team who've lost 4 games recently. A team who, I watched a bit of the game in Istanbul last night. It was a 4-3. I mean, that could have gone United's way, but expecting other results to go your way, you're not going to be winning anything with that. It'd just be a shame if United don't go through from their perspective, obviously, when they played so well in parts of the group. But that result in Istanbul a few weeks ago, that could end up being really, really costly, because they could have gone to Istanbul and played and got a draw there if they hadn't been asleep. But they were asleep and they played dreadfully.
That game was 3-3 last night in the 85th minute. That's when Istanbul equalised, and then RB score very late on to win it. Can we just talk about Van de Beek? Because there's a view or a suspicion among supporters that he wasn't a Solskjaer signing per se, that he wasn't one of the ones that Solskjaer was banging the table for. He was one of those players that's on a transfer list that you acquire because you realise that it's a good bit of business, and he will be a player who you get 40 appearances out of over the course of the season, but he may not be a starting player. He may not be the solution to what Solskjaer thought he wanted in midfield. Is that your sense, that he was bought to be a squad player, or is it actually he is a Solskjaer player and he's just betting in?
I've said it on air. I said it on air when people were asking why he wasn't playing. He was bought to be a squad player, and that's not to do down squad players, because they're going to be very, very important in a league and year when you've got Champions League football. Was he given the same preference as bringing Jadon Sancho in? No, I mean, he's a very good player who's still young, came from a good team. He had European experience. He was and is versatile. He can play more forward. I think he's done well in the last few weeks. He looked really tired towards the end of the Southampton game, and that may be because he had a big knock and he's still coming to terms with Premier League football. And I think it's unfair just to judge him straight away. Obviously, people will, and I think he's played well. And I think he'll play. If he's going to play 40 games, then great. You're more than a squad player. That's really important. I can't see Paul Pogba playing 40 games this year, but there is that counter that 40 million, you should be going straight into the first team. Really, in this day and age, I think you're going into the first 16, but maybe not. You're not going into the first 11. Because he'd done so well, he may have felt that he should have started, but I think that was a tactical decision rather than a slight against him, and playing McTominay and Fred in the two in front of the defence to give you that platform. You know what they're going to give, and unfortunately what Fred gave was one of the more unforgiving parts of his game, where he gives the ball away a little bit too much. That stops him being a truly world-class player. But he does have the legs, and when he his head moved forward and brushed along the side of Paredes. I was thinking straight away, this is Brazil against Argentina here, but it cost Manchester United, and that's not good enough.
Where are we at the moment in how the job security looks like from Solskjaer's perspective? Because they've a game in hand at the moment on most teams in the Premier League, and if they were to win that, they'd be level on points with Chelsea, and everything would be like, well, actually, wow, all of a sudden they've turned the season around. But if they go out of the Champions League next week, then there's also the opportunity for the vultures to start circling again. So what's the truth in your instinct about where the hierarchy views the Solskjaer era at the moment?
Today is absolutely secure in his job. But as you say, lose against West Ham, managed by David Moyes, in a stadium where United have been really poor in recent seasons, go out of the Champions League, and it puts a totally different perspective on things, and the pressure will build. The vultures will start picking off. A lot of fans will as well, and they're entitled to. Fans are absolutely entitled to their opinion. But as of today, following that defeat, following 4 straight wins, ahead after that defeat in Istanbul, he's secure. I spoke to him for 9 or 10 minutes the other day, and he said, we're getting better. And I think United are getting better. But they're not at PSG's level, and PSG won the game. The frustrating thing is United were playing well. Anthony Martial needed to take those chances at that level. The Parisian against Paris, and then Edison Cavani, who's been playing well, superb at Southampton. He tried that chip and it hit the crossbar. It's the fine margins, and he's going to be a very important player for United. It's very unfortunate what went on with his social media the other day, which is going to likely lead to a ban, but they're the rules. And I think I'm told, and have been for a month now, that in training he's fantastic, and the coaches hope that the younger players just take more and more from him. Just watch him, watch how he moves, watch everything about him. He's a world-class player. But PSG are full of world-class players. They are better than Manchester United, and they prove that.
Has Solskjaer ever been under any real pressure? Because it does seem that if you look at the back pages any morning after a Manchester United defeat, there will always be this perceived pressure on him. But has there actually legitimately been conversations happening within Old Trafford that we need to reconsider his position?
To my knowledge, no. And I looked Ed Woodward in the eye a year ago when United had picked up 11 points from the first 8 games. So even though this season started badly, United have still got 4 more points than at the same stage in the league last year. Now, this is the smallest of mercy because United started very poorly last year as well. But there's no appetite at all for continually sacking managers, and they've got a plan and they want to see it through. But there's also got to be minimum requirements. That's my take on it, is if Manchester United finished 8th this year, then he's going to be under serious pressure. There's got to be improvement. He needs a trophy, for example. Yeah. United have still got this huge wage bill and a lot of talented players. And the league table is really unpredictable this year. You're not getting Liverpool, who I think will win the league, running away with it. They're wobbling. Every team's wobbling. There's so many external factors, no fans, losing players to COVID, the intensity of the matches in the season. And that could work United's way. But if it doesn't, then after 2 years, it starts to get dangerous for Ole Gunnar.
And on the business side, there's obviously an opportunity when the rest of the global economy is struggling the way it is to find some bargains in the transfer market. They didn't manage to do that in the summer with the Sancho deal, but that doesn't mean that at Christmas around Europe there aren't clubs who are looking at fire sales. Are Manchester United potential buyers in the January transfer window, do you think?
If their targets became available, or if we had a repeat of the Bruno situation last year where United were doing so badly, they had to bring someone in to change the season, and he did do. And of course, fans will always say that they need more. And the clubs who have had fire sales, even Barcelona, who let 4 world-class players go for less than 10 million, including Vidal, Rakitic, Luis Suarez, they're not suddenly miraculously flush with money. I think there's an economic reality for every club, including United. United are better placed than most, but it costs over £4 million every time Old Trafford's empty. Is there a queue of sponsors like there has been for any club? No, there's not. It's more difficult. So United have got money, but I cannot see United. I could never see United signing Jadon Sancho, and I said that throughout, for the type of money that Dortmund wanted. And if United managed to get rid of some of the players who aren't featuring, then that would change the situation, because you've got players there on top money who aren't even playing. They've got no future at the club. And they've still got the bloated wage bill. Now, the only team with a bigger wage bill than United were Barcelona. They got rid of all the players, but they were getting rid of proven winners who'd won league titles. It's a bit harder for Manchester United to get rid of Marcus Rojo or Jesse Lingard.
Just on that point of the Barcelona clear-out, Neymar was talking about that last night in the aftermath of the game. He was talking about Lionel Messi. He was saying that what I want most is to play with Lionel Messi again. For sure, we have to play together next year. They were in comments reported by ESPN last night. From your knowledge of Barcelona, do you see the two of them linking up at Paris Saint-Germain? Is that actually a likely scenario here?
The Barcelona players love Neymar. They wanted him back. They expected him back. They didn't want Griezmann to come. And that was partly because Griezmann went on TV and did this stupid announcement saying, I'm not joining Barcelona. And it's all about money. And I don't think Barcelona are flush. They've got a new president coming in. So it's likely to be Joan Laporta. And when Laporta came in 03, he came in with big ideas. He came in thinking, I'm bringing Beckham to Barcelona. That's what got him in. And he was a relative outsider. And I've known Laporta since he was a fan activist in 1998. And Beckham didn't come in the end, but they got Ronaldinho from Manchester United. And everybody was saying, where's the money come from? But if you're Barcelona in Catalonia, you've got an incredibly high standing and credit lines to all the banks who want to work with you. And that's how they got Ronaldinho. Could Barca bring Neymar back? I mean, that's the dream. But Barca fans want to buy into dreams. And then the more probable thing, what you're saying, is Messi going to PSG because he's been so unhappy at Barca, who are really struggling this season, who before the weekend's win against Osasuna were mid-table. With Messi, I think he does want to go, but then I think his family are really happy in Barcelona, and there's all these factors. You can almost see it being mapped out for him. Go to Manchester City, work with people you worked with before, and then as your levels decline, go to other clubs in the City group, be it in Australia or New York. But I don't know what he wants. I'm just speculating there. I'm not privy to the conversations between him and his wife, who's very happy living overlooking the Mediterranean in Barcelona, even though her best friend, Mrs. Suarez, has gone to live in Madrid.
It is a different world from the rain of Manchester and the squally Irish Sea. Andy, great to have you with us this morning. Cheers.
Thank you. Andy
Mitten giving us some thoughts about what happened last night. A bit more upbeat, I would have said, after a defeat, I guess, because Paris Saint-Germain are so good. 0879 180 180. We'd love to hear from you. Loads of comments coming in about that, and I'll get to them in just a moment. 4 minutes past 8. A packed show still to come. We've got Gordon Darcy joining us a little bit later on this hour. We're going to catch up with Tom English over in Scotland about Celtic, and we might ask a few Scottish rugby questions too. Up next, we're talking GAA hype with John Duggan.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station. OTB Sports Radio.
We've got a panel who know a thing or two about being trailblazers.
Paul Rouse, sport was already kind of impeded upon.
Sinead Kassan.
There's an innate interest in it anyway.
Dermot Lang, it didn't blow me away with him.
Jason Sherlock and Kieran Donaghy with us.
Basketball would have been my main game.
Retro panel for you now.
This is OTB Sports Radio, the Retro Panel, Wednesdays and Thursdays from 4.
See, last year, you very much put Clara on the map of Ireland, and everyone knew where it was. And what was it like growing up there? And I know your dad and my dad are good pals from their endeavours on the football pitch back in the day. But it was very much a GAA household, I'm sure, and golf came second, but very quickly rose through the household, I'm sure.
Yeah, a complete GAA household. Especially as well, my mum has 10 brothers. Not all of them which play GAA, but most of them did. and obviously my dad's family as well. I grew up I grew up in Clara, from Forban, so I played football for Clara. He played for Forban, but it was we lived, and still to this day we kind of live and breathe GAA down there, and even though awfully we're not going through the best patch, we still love it, and we still go to every game or as many games we can. My dad's heavily involved still and loves it, and just growing up, that's all we want to do. All I wanted to do when I was young lad was play football, and all I wanted to do was play for Offaly. And then sort of towards my teenage years, I started to play golf, and quickly, I think I'm just a competitive person, and I quickly realised that I was actually half decent at it. And then when you realise you're half decent at something, you kind of want to become better, don't you? So you kind of keep going. And look, I didn't know that it was going to lead me to where I am today, but it was one of those where I was just trying to go and be as good as I could be and see where it left me. And the years I've ended up here, and I'm very fortunate with that. But yeah, it was just growing up in Clara, like we're a football club mainly, not much hurling, just loved it. Played every sport. I played a bit of soccer, played a bit of everything. Anything that was going on. I just love sport in general, and even to this day, that's the way I am. And yeah, it was I had a great childhood going to games and going to training the weekends and playing matches and playing for Clara. I loved every minute of it.
Bet smart this season with stat betting on the Boyle Sports app. Bet on shots, shots on target, tackles, passes, assists and more, all powered by Opta. Plus, put your feet up and cheer your bets home with free live streaming on every UK and Irish horse race. Why not check out the hottest action on the biggest sporting events right now on the Boyle Sports app. Boyle Sports. This is betting. Need help? Contact gamblingcare.ie. 18+.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, your most supported our frontline workers this Movember.
7 minutes past 8. You'll have seen episode 3 there of the brilliant new Bernard Brogan podcast. That one is with Shane Lowry. It's available now in the OTB GAA stream. So you get onto the app and click podcast and click OTB GAA, and there it is. There, great stuff, really in-depth conversation between two legends of Irish sport, and you can also get it wherever you get your rest of your podcast too. Check it out. It's all with thanks to Super Value, proud sponsors of the 2020 All-Ireland Senior Football Championship. John Duggan is with us now at 8 minutes past 8. Good morning to you, John.
Kieran Owen, how are we doing?
What's the crack?
Well, Man United fans, lads, can be forgiven for feeling a little bit fed up this morning.
Hey.
A 3-1 win for Paris Saint-Germain at Old Trafford, and Fred was on edge all night. He should have gone for a mild headbutt, I would describe it, on Leandro Paredes. Then he trod on him, but Ole Gunnar Solskjaer inexplicably didn't take him off in the second half, and then he got sent off. So Neymar scored twice. United now have to go to Leipzig and secure at least a point to get into the last 16 of the Champions League. But once again, that tearing your hair out inconsistency with Manchester United under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer leaves questions out in the atmosphere about the man's future, and like the questions will not go away because they're so consistent. The next day they could go and win the match 10-0, then the week after that they could lose 10-0. That's the way I just feel with Man United, and to make such a schoolboy error not to take Fred off was a bit worrying for me. Olivier Giroud had one of those amazing nights last night, scored 4 goals for Chelsea away to Sevilla. They're through as group winners to the last 16 of the Champions League. Europa League this evening, we've got Dundalk looking for their first points against Molde in Norway, fined €50,000 for shadow coaching. Giovagnoli will not be in the technical area. He's banned tonight and for next week's game against Arsenal, and he will not be allowed into a technical area until he gets his pro licence, and that could be a couple of years away. We have Spurs involved against Lask with Harry Kane a doubt now for the North London derby at the weekend. So they're the Europa League matches, and Celtic as well, with Neil Lennon under pressure going to AC Milan this evening. Rugby-wise, Johnny Sexton and Robbie Henshaw set to be named in the Irish 15 to take on Scotland on Saturday. That's in that Nations Cup match. Shane Fives fit for Waterford. We've got a clean bill of health for the All-Ireland hurling final against Limerick on Saturday week at Sunday week rather at Croke Park. Racing at Clonmel today is at 12:30. And that's really the main headline sports news-wise this morning.
John, your column's out where you're talking about how the underdogs, this might be the year for the underdogs to do something because of the various things that aren't there. Just explain a little bit about what you're thinking here is.
My thinking is really that I was at the 2 hurling semi-finals, and when you go to the first one, it was at the Leinster final, Kilkenny and Galway. It's such a novelty because we actually have sport, and it's great that you have the novelty of it behind closed doors, and all you really hear is the crack of the sliotar and a constant running commentary of players shouting and playing with no less intensity than they normally would. But I spoke to Tommy Welsh then after the semi-finals, and you feel the kind of the novelty wearing off, and then you realise this is a night and day situation to what we normally have. We normally have 82,300 people, and for the Waterford players, I think that what I saw against Kilkenny was them very much in the moment, and they didn't have any hype to deal with. They don't have fans. They don't have players have people ringing them up out of the blue for tickets. They don't have the suits, the banquets, the palaver of homecomings really to deal with now for this final against Limerick on Sunday week. They don't have the extended break between matches. And I was reading Ken McGrath's book, and he was speaking about how the occasion really affected them back in 2008. And I was also thinking about other All-Ireland teams that were affected by expectation, like the Dubs in the early 90s, or Mayo a couple of times, 96, 2006. Even Roscommon 1980 in football probably should have won. Tyrone in 1986 probably should have won. And then I was thinking about managers in their first seasons that have won All-Irelands and made breakthroughs. Clare 95, Loughnane, Tyrone with Mickey Hurst, Armagh with Joe Kernan, even in established counties, Jack O'Connor, Jim Gavin, and maybe Liam Cahill has just caught lightning in the bottle with Waterford. Maybe there's more focus on the message and the process and the freshness of that, and maybe the lack of pressure from the fact that fans are not there will make it easier for Waterford on Sunday week against Limerick. In the last few minutes of the Limerick-Galway game, Evan Nyland, who came on for Joe Canning, sent this beautiful point over the bar. Normally, the crowd will go absolutely mental. That can be a positive, that can be a negative. But you don't have that mad euphony of a goal being scored, that celebration in Croke Park. You don't have that feeling that a point or a goal has been scored when somebody makes a clearance. And therefore, I think that Waterford, 61 years after the last one at All-Ireland, might be under less pressure now to finish the job on Sunday week. And Limerick have more, if there is pressure, more on them, because they've got to go and beat a team they've already beaten in the championship again and reclaim the Liam McCarthy Cup, because I would say that they're the best team in the country.
Can you apply that to this weekend at all, John, in the football?
Well, I just feel that it's an amateur sport, and look, Dublin and Mayo should be the finalists, but I do think, and I know that Bloody Sunday commemoration was a big thing, but I don't get the sense from hearing the Tipperary players that it was that really relevant to actually happen during the Cork game. So I do think that Cavan and Tipperary's provincial wins might have been more based on process than the occasion and the history of what they did. If the fans were there, if it was tighter, would that have affected them in a negative way? I actually also think that the water breaks are helping because teams are regrouping. Like Tom Morrissey clipped over 3 points there late on for Limerick against Galway, and they were just popped over. I didn't feel that like in 2018 where Limerick were being closed down by Galway, that you felt the weight of 45 years on their shoulders. And that's why I think this could help Waterford on Sunday weekend. If Mayo qualify for the final against the Dubs, it could help Mayo.
Yeah, I really think that in years to come we'll look back at the absence of crowds as being important for various teams for different reasons. It's hard now to calibrate exactly what the impact is going to be. So Limerick, for example, might feel that pressure if they were to go into a big lead and Waterford were to claw them back. If the crowd was there getting super nervous and going, oh, which you hear from crowds, and like the nervousness of a crowd for a team who isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing or who did and is now being reeled in. Like, if they don't have that, they might be able to push on and keep Waterford at bay. And we'll say, oh, you know, at that moment, it would have been interesting to see what the momentum of the crowd and how that might have swung things for them would have been.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that for a big shock to happen, and I don't think a big shock in the hurling final will be Waterford beating Limerick. I think Dublin getting beaten would be a big shock. I think for that to happen, there needs to be an accumulation of momentum against a team, and I definitely think that'll be easier in an empty stadium, because if Mayo, for example, are 3-4 points up against Dublin in a full stadium, you can surely appreciate that in the ground from both sets of supporters, this idea that, hold on a minute, this thing could actually happen. We've felt that before. We felt that in 2017, especially. I think that without that in the ground, There's just an even easier process for the Dublin players to go through, where they tap their head or they touch their shoelaces or whatever it is, where it's like, right, okay, no, it's okay, we're back on here. We can arrest whatever the swing is going to be. So, I don't know. You can look at it both ways, and I think that it's whatever way it turns out to be at the end. I think if Mayo end up winning the All-Ireland, we'll end up saying, oh, it's because of the empty stadium. I think that Dublin's process might be clearer as a result of it, but also Mayo can't be swayed by it. If that is the final we have, I still think that Tipperary this weekend can also apply a similar idea in their quest to try and take down Mayo.
Okay, John, in the last 30 seconds we have with you, who's going to be in the All-Ireland football final?
Dublin and Mayo. And I suppose the good thing about this is not a scientific thing, and it's maybe, I'm not really applying science to the argument this morning. It is more to just express, folks, that there is night and day between what I've seen at Croke Park and what you'd normally see. And that will definitely have an impact in some way.
All right, John, good stuff. Thanks a million for that. It's John Duggan. You can read that column on the OTB Sports app or indeed on otbsports.com. It is 16 minutes past 8. A reminder, of course, that OTB Am is live in association with Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. We have a Twitter poll going this morning. Who is the most likely candidate to become Johnny Sexton's long-term successor for Ireland? I mean, the obvious answer is Joey Carberry, right? And he is winning at the moment. It's Joey Carberry, Ross Byrne, Billy Burns or Harry Byrne. Byrne, Burns and Byrne, the law firm that you didn't know you needed, but they're right there for you if you, get into any trouble on a night out. Carberry, 44%, Ross Byrne, 15%, Billy Burns, 12%, and Harry Byrne. What figure do you think? If your math's that good? Do you know this?
No, I don't.
27%.
So Harry Byrne is second.
Harry Byrne is easily second, miles ahead of. People want to see Harry as much as they want to see Ross and Billy combined.
That's very interesting. I think that people are obviously getting ahead of themselves a little bit on this front. I think that the Ross Byrne...
Who puts that into the Byrne family WhatsApp group?
It's a brave person who does that. Like, if you put that poll up 2 years ago, would there have been a similar result for Ross Byrne, I wonder? I just wonder if there is this big attachment to something that hasn't really happened in an Ireland jersey so far.
Yes.
That it's hard out there.
Yes.
It's hard to be an international test player. Ross Byrne hasn't got worse at rugby. Ross Byrne's stock hasn't dipped. Ross Byrne is just playing higher opposition. He's playing better opposition. He's playing test rugby in a team that isn't as good as it was 2 years ago. So of course Ross Byrne's stock is going to dip a little bit. I definitely think the pecking order in that poll is Joey Carberry healthy first and Ross Byrne healthy second.
Yeah, if healthy, right? But at the moment, Joey Carberry doesn't actually feature in the coach's thinking, and it is Ross Byrne and Billy Burns are 50-50 neck and neck. It appears at the moment.
So it appears. I don't, like, you're right. You can't make plans for Joey Carberry because chances are you'll have to rip up the plans because he's going to get injured again.
Well, we just have to wait. You know, I mean, I don't think there's any significant risk that he gets injured again if he comes back this time. It's like just they need to make sure that the injury has settled down and he's got a period of time where he's given the freedom to get healthy. And if that takes all of this year, then so be it. It's worth it.
Are you hatching a plan now to try and get a couple of those players onto the pitch at the same time? Are you looking at a Ford Farrell-esque 10-12 axis for Ireland over the next little while?
Yeah, you've got to be experimenting with that kind of stuff, right? Because then you can say, we are experimenting with things. I mean, I think you're looking at Sexton plus one of them, right? For the next 18 months as Sexton becomes somebody who you're not entirely reliant on and you're kind of taking him out of the team, but at the same time you're bringing somebody up to his level. And so he's not shaking the head angrily at the sub coming on. The sub coming on is already going, wow, Jesus, this isn't great, is it? I mean, that guy doesn't think I should be here. You know, maybe if they're playing together from the start, that might be alleviated somewhat.
You would have thought that Sexton and Ross Byrne would have built up that reputation or that respect for one another in the Leinster camp.
I'm sure they got
it's not a lack of respect. It's not a lack of respect, but that sort of, I'm getting the heebie-jeebies because the guy who's coming off the pitch is shaking his head. Like, that's happened at Leinster. Like, that sort of thing should be okay for Ross Byrne coming off the bench, you would have thought. But, like, I would definitely suspect that if they were going to try a 10-12 axis out that was a bit different, they might have done so this year, because I think the closer we get to the next World Cup, the longer time goes on, the more pressure comes back on Andy Farrell. Doing these things in an empty stadium this year where it feels like you're not going to get hounded out of a job at any point, this was the time for experimentation, but I know we've had that conversation already, and it's probably going to be something that pops up quite a bit over the next few months.
Yeah. All right. Ted O'Dallig on Twitter, where is Ben 10, Ben Healy at Munster? Are there rumours that Scotland are going to try and steal Ben Healy? Is that going on at the moment? There was some background rumours that they haven't tied him down for a contract just yet. Maybe it's just a contract. So Ben Healy, says Barry Casey. There's a lot of love out there for Ben Healy as well. I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit of Ben Healy nailing down the position for Munster, or maybe Munster just deciding, right, this is our guy now for the next number of years, and this is our coaching ticket for the next number of years. And so if it doesn't go well this year, it doesn't matter, because we've decided that we're all hitching this collective together. So one other thing, there's a brilliant section in the Shane Lowry conversation with Bernard Brogan, where he talks about taking a moment to enjoy winning the Open and that whole process and that whole experience, because, you know, we might never be here again. And I think even in the moment on the Saturday, which, you know, we've talked about as like one of the single greatest ever performances by an Irish person in any sports sphere in Irish sports history. He was absolutely dominant against a world-class field. He ripped them apart, you know, and won the Open with a day to spare, which never happens. But he talked about actually being in the moment and enjoying it, and how he hopes that Tip and Cavan in particular took the time to enjoy the moment of winning the Munster and Ulster titles. I wonder in a couple of years' time, are we going to look back and say that they actually managed to enjoy it in a way that was easier because there wasn't the throng of crowds, that they got to spend time with the team and the people and their own little bubble, and they were kind of in a way forced to reflect on it, as opposed to immediately going on the piss that night and bringing the cup around the schools, that there was less pressure on them to do the set pieces of celebration, and actually it was a quiet reflection that kept them in the moment. I don't know.
It's a really interesting one, actually. I hadn't considered that. Maybe it says a lot more about me than them, but I definitely thought to myself, God, isn't it a shame that the pubs are closed? Isn't it a shame that they couldn't go on the last night after winning their provincial title? But I guess in this way, you're not trying to find your teammates after the whistle, because, let's face it, there would have been pitch invasions in both of those games had it been in normal times. You're not trying to find your mates on the night out. You're not sitting there in a hazy heap the next morning worrying about your recovery session. It definitely would have been a bit more controlled. It would have had to be a lot safer. And yeah, I think in times to come, their memories will be of spending time with their teammates in the dressing room afterwards, the quietness, the stillness, the happiness, rather than the madness that might come with other provincial wins. Like, of course, the madness might be celebrated eventually. Who knows what will happen if things get together early enough next year. You know, they can maybe just don't take part in the Munster Championship next year, Tip, and just go on a 3-week bender instead, or something like that. There's multiple different options they can do to try and celebrate this down the line. But like, it's interesting. Like for Shane Lowry, I'd say he had almost a perfect situation where obviously you are surrounded by fans at the time, but you can get away a little bit and then drive back down the road to Dublin and like stand on tables and go into the Boar's Head and be thronged properly by fans after that point. But I guess he had the best of both worlds really at that point.
Yeah, because he'd known from a day out as well that it was going to happen. So, right, it's 24 minutes past 8 here this morning on OTBAM. Let's bring you through the newspapers. The front page of the OTBSports.com and on the app is John Duggan. No pressure, no hype means history could be made. So that's obviously a picture from the second last time that Waterford were in an All-Ireland final. I hate all these ideas. Dan McDonald talking about the Champions League expansion. We didn't really get into it yesterday's show, but yeah, I would tend to agree with him. Give us the scientific reason. Basketball and the COVID-19 restrictions. Grassroots sport is very much pissed off across the board. Underage soccer games can't be played. Indoor basketball can't be played. They can't pass the ball to each other when they're training, and they're making the case that there's no scientific evidence for this at all. The Gitto rule could work for Sexton, O'Mahony and Earls, says Matty Williams. So essentially what they did was in Australian rugby, they came up with a plan to allow their most decorated players move abroad and still get picked. So essentially you couldn't move when you were a kid. You could move after you had, I think, was it 80 caps? Was that the figure?
80, yeah.
Yeah. So a bunch of our players could actually move abroad and still get picked for Ireland, but earn loads more money and, more importantly, come off the IRFU's wage bill. So by insisting that everybody stays in Ireland, you limit the potential income that the players can make, and you also lock yourself into having to pay them at market rates. Whereas if some of these players went off and played abroad, you wouldn't be paying them anymore, but you could still pick them if they've reached a certain threshold of caps. I think all of these ideas need to be on the table from the IRFU's perspective, and they need to be saying, okay, well, what are we going to do here? Because if some of our best young players feel like they're not going to be getting game time because there are opportunity blockers in their way, then they end up moving abroad and potentially being stolen under qualification rules, and they get lost to our system entirely. So what's the balancing act that we do here?
Well, I would say that instead of the 80 caps, we need 45 caps, because Donnacha Ryan's on 47 caps. So let's bring that way down so that he could play. The one thing is that the whole premise of the IRFU's rules is to control their players. And the question is it more important to control your young players or your old players? I think there's a case to be made that it's important to have control over someone like Johnny Sexton, if he was in the Irish system right now, rather than having him flogged week in, week out in the top 14. So he's obviously entitled to go and earn his money abroad. But the whole point of why IRFU suggests that Irish players shouldn't be moving abroad is because they want control over you, because of your welfare, because they want to manage your minutes. For those players who are invariably going to be over the age of 30, your minutes will no longer be managed, and you could be playing ridiculous numbers of minutes all season long, and then you're coming back and you might be very little use at all to the international team. So I think it's a nice idea in theory, and when I heard Matt talk about it last night, I thought, actually, it's a great idea. The more you think about it, the more you think to yourself, well, actually, a younger player might actually be able to sustain the rough and tumble of a full season and playing ridiculous minutes in Premiership or top 14 better than, say, a Johnny Sexton. OK, fair point, but isn't it up to the player to decide if they think they're going to be able to manage that? And so some players might be able to manage it. They might be absolute physical specimens who can play in the Premiership. The English players seem to be able to play in the Premiership and play international rugby. That's my kind of counter-argument too. Well, what about England? It's like, yes, they look bloody good, don't they? Are we still then taking the information from 2018 and applying it to this argument? Are we saying that that was the reason why we thought England were crap in 2018, and it has to still be true because we said it back then? Maybe we were actually wrong about it in 2018. Maybe the minutes thing actually is a little bit of a weak argument. I don't know, but I definitely think that if you're coming off a very tough season, it's going to be hard to... If you're in the middle of a tough season, which is what the Six Nations is, it's going to be very hard to get up for that. I think when it comes to something like the World Cup, you're going to be okay because that's at the start of the season and you go in fully refreshed. And I know we keep bringing it up, but unfortunately it's what this Irish team is going to be judged on in 3 years' time. And if you're playing abroad and if you played a full season, you're going to have the summer off. You're going to be with your test team before the main competition. It's just the Six Nations where you're going to falter, really, because that's right in the middle of the season. But maybe we should be placing a little less stock on the Six Nations and more stock on that one big competition every 4 years. Who knows? Like, I don't know what the correct answer is here, but I definitely, my initial reaction when Matt said that last night was, this is a decent idea and maybe we should look into it. The Irish Times front page, we're going to run you through these very quickly. Chance meeting that led to Keller keeping goal at Anfield. That's the serendipitous moment where a coach, Stephen Birmingham, bumped into Caoimhín Kelleher's mum and said, has he ever thought about playing in goals? And then ultimately they work with him through the FAI's Emerging Talent Programme, and then he goes in goals for Ringman Rovers, and away he goes and ends up in the Champions League. Go on. The Irish Sun this morning. Name and shame is the headline here. It's Fred the Red as Paris Saint-Germain punish Ole. I'm lucky I'm still in the job. We'll get to this with Tom English later on. Neil Lennon led Celtic to Milan last night and confessed, I could have been sacked by now, which is a very interesting line. Fives OK for Daisha, meanwhile. Shane Fives will be available for their All-Ireland final against Limerick. And bad news for Spurs fans, or potentially bad news for Spurs fans. Harry in a sweat. Tottenham are sweating on the fitness of Harry Kane ahead of Sunday's North London derby. I personally can't remember a time when a North London derby has been so heavily favoured towards Spurs. I can't remember a time when Spurs have gone so well at the start of the season and it looks really sustainable. But if Harry Kane is injured ahead of a really busy schedule, then that could be the thing that derails the season. So hopefully from their perspective it's not that bad. The Racing Post, the moment we've been waiting for, that's fans going back to racing in the UK, which obviously you'd hope that we'll get fans at something here pretty soon as well. The Irish Daily Star goes with the headline, Fred and buried. Meanwhile, Lennon thanks Desmond for not sacking him just yet. Filippo's hit by UEFA ban. This is Filippo Giovagnoli facing
Can he continue? Can he continue? Do you think? Is it? Can you do your job if you're not qualified for these big games? Isn't the whole point of that? It's a difficult scenario. You can't see it continuing for too long, can you?
No. And the other thing in the Irish Daily Star is Barry Cahill saying Cavan don't have any baggage with the Dubs.
They don't. That just means that the Dubs don't care about beating them by 18 points. It's like, okay, yeah, whatever. The Irish Examiner read for Fred as United suffer costly defeat, and Cahill delighted full Waterford panel will be able to attend All-Ireland final. It'd be great if one of the managers came out, it's a real pain in the ass, you know. They're so negative after not getting in the team. I was really happy about the fact that they couldn't travel with us, because they're a real downer. No manager in the GAA ever said. Back page of the Herald, Dubs all clear, just when you thought it wasn't possible to be any stacked in their favour anymore. But Johnny Cooper's grand.
Back page of the Mirror is name and shame. Brazilian strikes twice as United face final game shootout after Fred's costly red. City fury at Porto Silverant and 266 days, but the fans are finally back.
What would you do if you had a magic wand, Owen? What would you do with your magic wand?
Oof. Like anything. Is this like...
Whatever you want, you know, it's your magic wand, buddy.
I've always said if I've got any powers to cast a spell, it will always be time travel.
Neil Francis would bring Joe Schmidt back with his magic wand.
Sorry, my second preference would be to bring Joe Schmidt back.
That's it. Yeah. Front page headline. If I had a magic wand, I'd bring Joe Schmidt back.
I think there is a chapter in Harry Potter detailing how to beat the All Blacks.
And then Fives back in as Daisha. Fives back in Daisha picture for final. Their headline is Code Fred for United. Is that tab of the morning?
No, Fred the Red or Name and Shame.
Name and Shame. NEYM.
Back page of the Irish Daily Mail. Heat on Cody. Any other boss would face axe, says Fogarty. We had Aidan Taggy Fogarty on the show with us yesterday. It's a piece worth digging out. He went through all the possible contenders with us as well. And Ringrose targets pre-Christmas return. So good news for Leinster, good news for Ireland.
And the Telegraph. Get set for a golden summer of sport. Wimbledon, I forgot about that. Wimbledon, Lords and other venues plan for capacity crowds. Vaccine likely to be too late for Six Nations and Cheltenham. So I wonder, do they kick anything back? They might kick the Six Nations back, given how much money they make from those games. Play the November internationals in the Six Nations window and play the Six Nations in the... It would be fine for a year, wouldn't it?
It's basically just going to be another mad winter sport. It's going to be the exact same thing, but just with a load of fans there instead. So if you thought that this was a one-and-done sort of winter where you couldn't get away from your TV at the weekends, then it might actually be the same thing next year. The Guardian this morning. Fred the Red sours United's night as Giroud scores 4. Joshua, meanwhile, is happy to take cash hit if he can fight Fury in Britain. That's The Guardian. And speaking of Tyson Fury, he's also on the back of the London Times.
What's the story?
Take me off BBC shortlist, orders Fury. But broadcaster refuses to accept boxer's demand. So Tyson Fury and BBC locked in a new fight last night, reports Rick Broadbent, after the broadcaster refused to grant his wish to be removed from the shortlist. So the champion, who was previously dubbed Spotty a Fix, was named on a 6-strong shortlist on Tuesday. So there's obviously some bad blood here from a previous year. He said that he did not want any part. He released a video yesterday. This is a message for BBC and their Sports Personality of the Year award, he said in the video. Please take me off your list as I'm the People's Champion and have no need for verification or any awards. I know who I am and what I've done in sport. The love of the people is worth more to me than all the awards in the world. So to all my supporters, please don't vote on this and take me off the list. All my love, Tyson Fury. If he says he's the People's Champion, then I guess being voted Sports Personality of the Year would have been a rubber stamping of that title.
His inclusion sparked controversy, says the Telegraph, given he served a backdated 2-year ban after failing a drugs test and remains under investigation amid claims a false defence was offered on his behalf, which his camp has denied. He was also forced this year to sever ties with an alleged crime lord who had helped broker a deal to fight Anthony Joshua. Fury was at the centre of controversy, which led to the only other known association in which a spotty contender was asked to be removed from the shortlist. In 2015, Greg Rutherford wrote to the BBC because he felt uncomfortable being part of the ceremony with Fury, who had expressed deeply homophobic views that year. This is a story where it looks like everybody's on the wrong side.
So did they just take Tyson Fury off and replace him with Marcus Rashford? Is that the...
They wouldn't put Rashford on. It was a great piece by James Corrigan in the Telegraph yesterday. They wouldn't put Rashford on because they wanted it just to be for events on the field of play. He was making the point that Zara Phillips beat somebody in the middle of the noughties. Who did she beat? Somebody sensational who'd won something incredible. And Princess Anne had won it one year as well. So they were like... He was basically saying, screw you, BBC, let us vote for Marcus Rashford. He is literally able to do what he's doing because of his brilliance on the field of play. That turned him into a superstar. And then he fed millions of starving children in Britain, right? In a first world country that's banging on about how rich they are, he fed starving children. That makes him the sports person of the year, undoubtedly. That was James Corrigan's point yesterday. He's right, but they're giving him a special award that's separate from that, so that he doesn't win that and show them all up, because they obviously have done not very much work when it came to feeding the starving children.
Yeah, but could he do it on a wet windy night against Belgium? That's the real criteria for Spotty, isn't it?
Yeah. All right. I mean, they'd take Stoke at this point. 8:36 this morning. If you want to get involved, we'd love to hear from you. 087 9 180 180. I want to tell you about the IRFU Charitable Trust and a new initiative that they have going, irfucharitabletrust.com/friends. Since 1978, the IRFU Charitable Trust has worked tirelessly to assist severely injured rugby players in their everyday lives. And now they're asking you to become a friend. Obviously, with the restrictions this year on meetups, it's been difficult for charities to run the traditional events that they would have used as their fundraising initiatives. Now, from the comfort of your own home, you can get involved. So, without the ongoing support of our rugby friends and their generosity, the Trust says, life-changing initiatives for our seriously injured players could not be realised. Funds raised from our Friends programme help with everyday needs such as wheelchairs and physical therapy, but also contribute to major initiatives including the ongoing research to spinal injury treatments, prosthesis and medications promoting nerve cell regeneration. So your friendship and generosity helps our seriously injured players live their lives to the full. And I've got some more details here. So check out irfucharitabletrust.com. You just pay an annual subscription and you can start your journey as a friend. At the moment, they have 100 individual friends and they're trying to get that to 1,000 by the end of the year. They have 14 rugby clubs. So if you're a member of a rugby club, you can sign up your rugby club as well. And they're hoping to get to 60 rugby clubs. And they have 16 rugby schools. They're hoping to get that to 60 by the end of the year as well. So it's a big drive and it's a big, important fundraiser for the Charitable Trust, and hugely important that and we're delighted to support. And also delighted to say Gordon Darcy is here this morning. He's currently an ambassador for them. Gordon, good morning to you. How are you?
Not too bad. You got me in the middle of the school run.
Yeah.
But happy to come on and say hello.
Yeah, and look, just very briefly, the Charitable Trust is something that I know that the players are always very happy to give back to, because it's always something in the back of your mind. You've seen players and former teammates suffer fairly serious injuries along the way. It's a brutal sport when things go badly, and it's very important that we highlight the fact that the Charitable Trust exists.
Yeah, listen, without a shadow of a doubt, 36 players in Ireland that need this service. And it is the contact sport, and unfortunately sometimes things don't go well. It's terrible that this charity has to exist, but I think there's plenty of people who will give testament to the fact that they're delighted that it does exist. But like with anything, we need people to support it. And this is something born out of the pandemic, which is fantastic. The friends of the Charitable Trust, it's a great idea, and hopefully people can get behind it, and something because the people who do receive and do benefit from this are really need it.
Yeah, no, 100%. And as I said, we're delighted to support it. Gordon, the graphic flashed up there. 82 Irish caps. We had Matt Williams on last night talking about maybe Ireland could consider a Matt Giteau rule. You would have qualified under the criteria where you could have gone away for a season or two at the end and had some fun, maybe earned a few quid, and still been able to play for Ireland. What's your take on that, and just how inflexible we are at the moment?
I think we have to be realistic on that as well. We're not... I don't think we're ever going to be able to compete with the salaries. I think the way the structures in Ireland are set up, it provides a balance to players. You will be afforded a longer career in Ireland than if you do go abroad, and you will be looked after better. But there is a quid pro quo to that. Success in Ireland can mean European Cups. It can mean, playing for your country, and going abroad. In theory, it's one of those things. It's very easy to argue and say, it'll broaden the player base. But that's not necessarily, it's unproven, these things to say just to go and do it. I think we need our best players playing here. I think when you look at all the provinces when the internationals are away, the big name draws, when they're not there, the stadiums aren't as full. So I think if you dilute the player base even more, you may struggle to fill stadiums.
Okay, so there's a balancing act to be struck with regards to...
I think there has, with everything, yeah.
It kind of comes off the back of, so Glasgow have apparently approached Ben Healy. We don't know, they haven't come out formally and said it because that's not how these things work, and apparently there are some Scottish ancestral links that would allow him to qualify for Scotland. It's a nightmare scenario where in 2 years' time, Ben Healy is starring at 10 for Scotland and beating Ireland. That's kind of the worst case scenario, and I'm sure that there's agents involved here somewhere along the way saying that this is a potential outcome of this. It is a difficult job to make sure that we keep the Ben Healys and make sure that he gets game time for Munster, and at the same time...
Yeah, but I don't even think necessarily this is an Irish conversation yet, and I think we have to, you're talking about Dan McFarlane talking about the young speedster up north and saying, listen, we need to afford this kid time to grow into the position and into his skill set, into his body. Exact same for Ben Healy. He has to grow. Everything we're seeing now is saying, yes, this is a guy who deserves investment, and Munster desperately need to keep him. I've been incredibly critical of the over movement of players around Ireland, and Indigenous players need to see a pathway into the provincial teams. And Ben Healy and Craig Casey are exemplary examples of that. So they have to be kept in Munster for Munster to survive as a club. And should he develop into the player that we're seeing sprinklings of every week, then that's going to be a fantastic conversation and a fantastic selection headache for the Irish coach. But first and foremost, we have to keep Munster Indigenous players in the country.
Yeah, and I guess this is all part of the conversation that's going on about where we are at the moment with regards to the professional playing stock. And essentially, in the aftermath of the press conference this week with David Nucifora and your column yesterday, I kind of feel like this is all part of it. It's his remit to make sure that the playing stock is managed properly and those contracts are managed properly. And with the pandemic, none of the contracts for the outgoing players have been signed yet or agreed yet. You made the point that it'll be a very anxious Christmas for a lot of very experienced players who have kids, who are coming to the end of a deal and who are thinking, should I sign a new deal in England and just lock something up because I have a mortgage and my kids are very young and I'm probably, I have one contract left, maybe two?
Well, there's a financial reality to life, and at some point there is, I think, probably what you're putting out there is that there's a tipping point between staying and representing, being the one club man and fighting for a place for the Irish jersey, and then that economic reality of saying, I don't know what I'm going to be offered, but I am being offered something in France, and I know of one of the players in the national team that French clubs haven't changed how they're doing things. They like to have their squads finished by the end of January. So if we're only starting our negotiation in January, you kind of wonder, in the absence of certainty or clarity, you can if you can get it somewhere else, it possibly could be hard to say no. And I understand there's a financial, that's been touted as the financial, we're still assessing the organisation. I find that one a little bit hard to understand, because any organisation that, I've been involved in or would expect an organisation the size of the IRFU to have done fairly robust modelling on what revenue, good, worst and best case scenarios for 2021. So I'm not sure where the ambiguity around all this. It does feel like a little bit like a negotiation tactic.
Yeah, I couldn't help coming to the conclusion when I read your piece yesterday that you don't really think David Nucifora is doing a good job. Do you think it's time for us to look at a different system, or should we be looking to move on from Nucifora at this point?
No, I think, it's very, you have to trying to put an awful lot into a few words. I think what the problem with this is, one of the problems is that there is an absence of what his remit is, and it's very, very loose. And what are his performance? What does success look like? That was one of the lines we used yesterday. What does success look like for David Nucifora? Because the media and most people that would take a keen interest in this are not that clear on it. There's been a lot of movement of players in around the provinces in that New Zealand esque model. Has that been a success? The review from the Rugby World Cup has not been openly shared. It's been addressed, and we have to take a word. You have to take people's word from that. There's just, one of the things I'm very used to was with Joe was around clarity. You may not always like the clarity, but once you have it and once you're being upfront about things, it's easier to to critique and to move on from it. But I do feel we're being largely left in the dark with a lot of this.
Yeah, so the bits of the World Cup review that came out certainly seemed to suggest that it was Schmidt's fault. There was a bit of blame for Enda McNulty, and it was interesting to me when the photographs came out where Nucifora was actually in coaching gear. I didn't realise that his role was kind of on the field of play at coaching sessions as well. That was a bit of a surprise to me when I saw that. So he's obviously deeply involved. I presume he's not actually doing coaching. He's keeping an eye on what the coaches are doing and trying to assess that. But there definitely doesn't seem to be that much clarity about what the role is. Like, is it your instinct that we don't have, that maybe the role is the right role, but we just don't know that, and that an open and transparent discussion around that would be useful? Or do you actually think that we're not doing a good job when it comes to that side of the game at the moment?
Well, I don't think it's being done particularly well. Like, I think, if the Leinster Schools game covers up an awful lot of the shortcomings in some of the other provinces. We talk about this pathway into elite rugby, and the club game has to be the main underdeveloped resource in the country. And whereas that, the whole thing has to knit together. So the role is the right role, but that open conversation and that open clarity around it needs to be detailed to the people that care and the stakeholders, because media are a stakeholder in this, fans are a stakeholder in this, and the clubs and the supporters, everybody are in it. And how, what is the, every job has a job description, and every job has those key performance indicators, or are the yardsticks that they're judged by. Everybody would just like to understand what they are and have a better understanding of them.
How do you repair that disconnect between someone like David Nucifora and the grassroots of Ireland, if they are the things that ultimately will lead to high performance and to success at high performing levels? How do you repair that disconnect?
I think that's, this isn't a a public caning of David Nucifora. This is where a part in the problem. Does that fall under his remit or not? And if it not, who does it fall under? Where is the development of the pathway from the club game into the professional game? Because like, how many clubs? 250, 230 plus clubs in the country. Has every club got an international representing them? Like, these things, you go down to any club, you go down to any underage club, last year or in the years coming, and you will see a couple of hundred kids there every week. What coaching are they getting? Is it the same quality? These are all the bits that we just need to understand, and that probably moves away from the David Nucifora point. But I do believe they all are integrated, and an integrated approach is probably desirable than the alternative.
Yeah. Can we talk about the actual quality of play that you're seeing on the field at the moment? And so we've obviously been talking about it a good bit on the show over the last couple of months, like what is the identity of Ireland under Andy Farrell going to be? And I don't really know just yet. I think he needs a little bit more time, given the lack of access that he's had and all that. But at the same time, it'd be good to start seeing some signs.
Yeah, like I think one of the things like we have to fundamentally accept is there's a big transition piece going on. One in the actual squad, and then second in the style of play. So remember, we had very quite spoilt with having a Devon Toner in a squad for the last 10 years, and regardless of how good your thrower was, you had somebody at 6'10" and pretty easy to lift, which. Not saying that it did mask, but could potentially have masked any shortcomings in a lineout. We now have two, medium to, two good-sized second rows in Ian Henderson and James Ryan, but we don't have that banker in there. Rory Best, one of probably the best scrummaging hookers that's ever, that has played for Ireland. There's been Jack McGrath, James Cronin in Killer down in Munster are not playing at the moment as well. So, not playing well, and Killer's not playing, and Jack's fighting for his position up north. So that kind of meaty pack isn't there, and anything you want to build off of that is going to, and we've fallen down in the set piece massively. So any involvement of our game plan is going to be harder to do that with a misfiring set piece. I think they can solve that in the short term, but I kind of feel that the game plan that we're playing at the moment, there is an awful lot of theory based in on that hasn't been tested in the against the Englands, against France, New Zealand, a real strong opposition, and I think we got a fairly good yardstick of where that game, the limitations of the way we were trying to play against England. I think this week, if we get some growth on the game plan and see some of those, a little bit more accuracy, and it's going to be a little bit, and I think we have to accept it's going to be around kicking and set piece. If we get those strong fundamentals and we see some of that involvement of that second wave attack that they are starting to play, then that's progress for me.
So you can see signs of that in games against lesser opposition, that Mike Catt, there are some imprints of what he's trying to do on the game plan. What is it? Like what are...
Yeah, like they definitely are trying to create opportunities by getting it to the width, and there's that kick and pass options on the wide, and just getting their game breakers onto the ball, which is around your Stockdale and Bundy Aki, getting on them in situations where they've talked about, like they've said what it is. It's heads up rugby, but that is quite existential in a lot of ways, because that is just creating mismatches. But to play heads up rugby, you need a strong set piece, and we do not have a strong set piece at the moment. So should they be able to repair that, we'll get a better understanding of what they are trying to achieve. And I said, just to labour this point on the transition period, all the players talked about the over detail and the level of detail that Joe Schmidt provided for players and demanded of players, which is fine until it's taken away. And now if you're actually putting a bit of responsibility back on players and they have to think their way out of problems and solutions, that doesn't happen overnight. That is going to take a lot of games. And I think, and I hope, we're feeling and seeing that pain now, with a view to 2021 players understanding. Like Ross Byrne, for example, will have taken that game against England, gone back, looked over every decision and gone, could I have done better? Where could I have kicked? Where could I have not have kicked? How would I manage my forwards? How could I have kept them on the front foot? How could we have made England play with the ball because England didn't want the ball? All those things need to happen.
That's an interesting point you make there about the Joe Schmidt coaching, that it does seem that this way of, I guess, empowering the players, allowing them to make the decisions, is more in line with how the coaching team at Leinster are operating. It's not a pre-programming of the players, and I guess at test level they're just trying to get used to that.
Yeah, I think so, and I would say the same with the other three provinces as well. Munster are definitely It's like the end of the Pro 14 season last year has just lifted a weight off their shoulders, and they're suddenly playing. Obviously some good Simon Delande has been very impressive for them, but they're playing a really, really nice game of rugby. Casey is playing with tempo. Healy's managing the game. Scannell, all these guys are coming in and they're playing. We got some, Coombs coming in at number 8. They're playing quite an enjoyable brand of rugby. So when the Munster players do go back to that, what we do now need to see is that transition for all these players when they go back to the provinces, that they continue to play. We know the Leinster players are challenged continuously, that the Munster, Connacht and Ulster players, when they go back, that they absorb that type of rugby, that heads up and that play what you see type of rugby, and they bring it back to the national team, and the national team can harness them, because we know that it's almost impossible to do that type of coaching in a national team, because you only get them for such short blocks. You need them to be doing it, living it every day.
And at least they are in the provinces, and you can see how that would make sense to bring that to national level. And you can see as well in a post-COVID, post-vaccine, when we all get them, that actually Andy Farrell can go and spend a week with the provinces and like see what's happening and learn a bit more about them. And that's where I'm kind of willing to give him a little bit of time. I don't know if everybody else is.
Well, I am as well, because the other thing as well is, sorry, not to cut you off, is the game plan has to it has to iterate with the players that are playing it. And I think we're seeing that now, and we just have to see the capabilities. We're seeing Doris now coming in at 8, how well him and CJ Stander are complementing each other. So how we get these people onto the ball, Stockdale he's our most potent threat. The game plan has to evolve to suit the players that are taking the field. And that takes time, unfortunately. We would love to have a silver bullet, much the same way we'd love with COVID. We don't. It will be incremental improvement over time.
I did want to ask one last thing, and it kind of ties before we get to your book, about Finlay Bealham is getting moved from one side of the scrum to the other. I do feel like that is definitely the bit where you're looking at your national, professional, whatever David Nucifor's gig is, and going, come on, why am I still making these changes in the week of a game for somebody, and seeing if he can play international test rugby out of position? Come on.
Yeah, like that's whatever about Andrew Porter, that, and I would put my hand up, and very, very limited on technical scrum knowledge. If that is a tight-head experiment that needs to continue, I put my hand up, but I don't see it going the other way. There are plenty of players in those positions that deserve to be playing in their natural position. Dennis Buckley probably isn't delighted in Connacht. I think it's Eric O'Sullivan up north and James Cronin in Munster, that are experienced, established loose-head props. That again is hard to, it's hard to understand at the moment.
Yeah, and look, if you're the coach, you're doing what you can to get your wins, but you hope that the pipeline is there, and that's supposed to be somebody else's gig as well. So, it is Christmas time. Your second of your trilogy is out, Godfather 2. It's called Blue Thunder. Is it better than the first one?
Oh, of course it is. It picks up nicely off the second one. So Joe Schmidt is the Leinster coach, and he comes in, and thankfully Paul Howard was able to help get what was in my head down on paper. So yeah, it's can Leinster turn it around? At the start of the book, they're watching. Everybody's a Munster supporter, and Leinster still have hopes to win a Heineken Cup. But there's a lot of road to go. A lot of fun things have to happen. From me working in McWonderburger to hopefully winning a Heineken Cup with Joe Schmidt and the Leinster team.
People forget now that actually happened, where the whole country were Munster fans.
Yeah. So when we were writing this up, and Paul was a sports journalist, so he had a good handling on it. But I was in Wexford and in the starting playing for Leinster, and at that time Munster were the dominant team in Ireland, and about to be the most dominant team in Europe for the next 7 or 8 years. Majority of people, they support success, and they supported Munster, and that's my home, county. But Leinster we had a very clear identity as a Dublin-based team, and credit to Mick Dawson and to everybody that's been involved with Leinster since, there was a huge push to move it into an all-province county, or all-province club. And we did that, but we had to fight for our supporters, and that comes across in the book. And it was fun because the Leinster thing is pretty funny. And then obviously this is it's a kids' book, so it's not just purely for boys. There's Aoife, the character in it as well, is fighting the good fight about. Is involved in the 20 by 20 women's campaign. So Aoife's character has more challenges as she's fighting for parity in the females in the women's game.
And I mentioned it's a trilogy, so you get finished the second one, you think, oh, okay, great, I can relax for a little while now, and then straight back into work for the third one.
Yeah, well, we've a good relationship with Paul, so I started bothering him a couple of weeks ago with some ideas. But because we did most of the planning in the first book, that we kind of have set the rules for the universe that the book exists in. So now we just have to map out the story and put the bits and pieces in it. And like Penguin are absolutely amazing, and Alan Nolan does the illustrations, and he gets it straight away. So it's just it's really good, and we really do hope that people enjoy it.
Well, listen, congratulations on it. It's called Blue Thunder. It's the second book of Gordon's Game. The third book, I guess, is out in time for next Christmas, but gets the full thumbs up from my 9-year-old too. So Gordon, great to have you with us. Thanks a million.
Thanks very much.
It's Gordon Darcy there, who was appearing today as an ambassador for the IRFU Charitable Trust, who I would remind you, just asking you to become a friend. You can donate. IRFUcharitabletrust.com is the website, and it is life-changing research for people who have suffered injuries and support for people who have suffered injuries playing rugby. 0879 180 180 is the number here. It's 9:01. OTB Am is live in association with Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Right, here's what's coming up on OTB Sports Radio across the day. Centaur is a book written by a guy called Declan Murphy. He was a jockey who suffered a horrific injury that forced him to really become a new person. There was a significant part of his brain was changed. He eventually makes it back, and his book is incredible. It was shortlisted for the William Hill Sports Book of the Year. That's OTB Gold at 1. Golf Weekly from 2. State of the Union with Paul Vaughan from 3 is our rugby show with Keith Wood. Our retro panel with Hearts and Holland and Cunningham. That was good crack. OTB Gold is Jerry Eisenberg on Ali, and tonight it's John Giles and the Super Value Road Show ahead of the All-Ireland Football semi-finals from 7 o'clock with Nathan and Joe. Tom English joins us next to talk Scottish rugby and Neil Lennon's future at Celtic. Stay tuned.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio. Off the ball.
I'm waiting for somebody to pinch me and tell me the game's on tomorrow, and that's the reality of it. Wow, what can I say? Cavan, such a tradition. I know the people at home. I know what it means to them. The blood goes through all our veins, and we've been waiting a long time for this. We've been waiting so long.
Off the ball. Weeknights from 7 and weekends from 1.
This is OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Follow the leader, the Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV, the world's best-selling plug-in hybrid, is now available with 0% finance and a free home charge point worth €800. Leading the charge in plug-in hybrid technology, the Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV. Book a test drive at your local dealer today. Mitsubishi, drive your ambition. Terms and conditions apply. See mitsubishimotors.ie. Lending criteria applies. This is a hire purchase agreement provided by Bank of Ireland Finance.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, your most supported our frontline workers this Movember.
3 minutes, nearly 4 minutes past 9 here on OTB AM, and I'm delighted to say Tom English from BBC Scotland is with us. Tom, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Very well. Yourself?
I wanted to talk essentially about Neil Lennon. But before we do, I've got 2 quick rugby questions to throw as a curveball this morning. Scotland have a very good chance of beating Ireland, and yet everybody in Ireland thinks this is going to be like an opportunity for us to restore some momentum heading into next year's Six Nations campaign. I am very concerned ahead of this game. I kind of feel like Scotland have a bit of mojo.
Yeah, listen, but the fact is that in the past, there's been a number of times, the recent past has been a number of times when Ireland have desperately needed a win, and then Scotland have provided it. So this might be another one of those. Scotland, just when you need them, the Scots arrive to give Ireland a win. I think it's a trappy fixture for Ireland. Certainly, Scotland you see now harder to beat, harder to score against. Not too many soft touch tries coming out of this Scotland team over the last year, and they cornered the market in soft touch tries conceded for maybe 20 years. And I can remember Ireland scoring a load of them, really dopey tries given away that broke a game open, and Ireland went on and won comfortably thereafter. So they've tightened up their defence much better, scrum much better, aggression much better. They're not scoring much, but then they don't have Finn Russell. He's the main creator. But they are a different outfit now, and you kind of saw a glimpse of that at the Aviva in February at the start of the Six Nations. I think Scotland deserved to win that game, quite honestly. They've won a few games since then, so they're dangerous. They're definitely dangerous.
Yeah. The only other thing that, before we get to Celtic, is Brett Gosper has quietly left World Rugby to join NFL Europe. And it's like, wow, rugby is facing this existential crisis. The global game is in chaos. And the head of World Rugby is like, yeah, everything's going great here. I'm heading off to join the NFL, lads. See you later. It's not a great sign.
Yeah, I won't lament Brett Gosper's departure, to be honest. I think he's a very good at promoting himself and not particularly good at doing what needs to be done in the game. I think the game is a bit of a mess at the moment. You can see Dan Leo's film about the way the Pacific Island nations have been treated. I don't think World Rugby have done anything about that. I think that's a blight on the game. So I would hope that somebody coming in will be more mindful of what needs to be done in the game than Gosper was. I'm not shedding any tears for him.
All right, fair enough. We'll move on to Celtic.
Yeah, let's talk about Celtic, Tom. Like, do you admire Neil Lennon and his honesty, or is a manager saying that he could have understood if he was sacked already a bad sign for a manager? The one thing, Neil Lennon is honest. He's brutally honest at times, maybe too honest for some of his players. Neil Lennon has been saying a lot because there are a lot of press conferences here. And some of the things that he's been saying have been words of a fairly desperate man when they lost 4-1 to Sparta Prague last week. He said, well, we were excellent for 35 minutes. That didn't sound good. He said, I'm scratching my head to figure out what's going on. That didn't sound good. He said, the players are missing the atmosphere, empty stadiums, they're missing the atmosphere. Wasn't great either. But these are the things, when you're on the kind of run that he's on, when you're taking the kind of stick that he's taking, and when you're having to speak so often, you're going to talk yourself into trouble. And he's done that, and some of the fans are going crazy, as we saw on Sunday night outside Celtic Park. Those scenes, fans trying to get to the team bus, throwing missiles, shouting abuse at Neil Lennon and his players. They took place not very far at all from where 9 years ago Celtic fans held a vigil, candlelit vigil for Neil Lennon after he got bomb in the post and bullets in the post and all sorts of vile threats and sinister stuff. So I think the whole Neil Lennon story in its totality is incredibly dramatic. That is the thing. Like, are you somebody who was also would have been of a very understanding mind had the board acted on Sunday after the defeat and actually got rid of him, or are you not surprised at all that they're sticking with him because you feel that there is a turn possibly coming sometime soon?
No, I wouldn't have been surprised if they got rid of him. I mean, I would have been one of the people who said Celtic will get this together. This is a bad run they're on, but I've seen them on bad runs before and they've dug themselves out of it and they've gone on a 10, 12 match winning run. But this one is a deeper crisis than any one that he's ever faced before. Not that he's faced too many crises because he's won loads of trophies and Celtic have been dominant for 9 years. But there's something about this one that's more serious. Now, that said, everyone said on after the Ross County defeat on Sunday, he's gone. He can't survive this. Yeah, in theory, yes. But nobody knows what's going on inside the head of Dermot Desmond. And ultimately, he's the one who makes the decision. Dermot Desmond has given one football interview in I don't know how many years. And in that interview, which was in October in The Athletic, he was very, very supportive of Neil Lennon. I mean, extremely supportive of Neil Lennon. Now, it predated the current situation, but he's a big Neil Lennon fan. So on one side, if you look at the results, that demands a manager should be sacked. But on the other, we have to factor in Dermot Desmond and Peter Lawwell, the chief executives, a huge loyalty to Neil Lennon. And that's won the day so far. But, the reprieve, the time is not limitless on this. If you keep losing, I think they'll lose tonight against AC Milan. If they lose against St Johnstone or even draw against St Johnstone on Sunday in the league, we'll see more really, really ugly scenes outside Celtic Park, and we might see the end of Neil Lennon.
And those ugly scenes that you mention, is there a sense within the Celtic supporting community that this is an outlier? Because it seems like there's a hell of a lot of people there on Sunday. Of course, the behaviour trying to storm the grounds is obviously a minority, but the general mood of people gathering, voicing their anti-Lennon kind of opinion at this point, it does seem that it's going to reach a critical mass, or has already got to that point.
Yeah, that kind of ugliness, that kind of violence, I think that's an outlier that it got to that stage. I think it was, hundreds outside the ground. There's quite a few of them. If you look at the videos, quite a few of them are laughing and joking and recording everything on their phones. Now, how many of those are really concerned Celtic fans, and how many of them are just morons who are looking to cause trouble? I'd say it's a bit of both. But I don't know how many Celtic podcasts there are. There must be like 500 Celtic podcasts. It's a ridiculous number. It's mad. And I think the one thing that unites nearly all the Celtic fans, nearly all the Celtic fans that I speak to, the one thing that they have in common is they want Neil Lennon to go. Now, there's various forms of expression of that. Some say he's a club legend, we love him to bits, but reluctantly, he has to go. And others, a minority, are saying it in more agricultural language than that. But I think it's pretty unanimous now that they can't see a way back with Neil Lennon.
You could say then, if you're starting a Celtic podcast, your gap into the market is to actually support Neil Lennon, to actually have a point of difference from everybody. You talk about the honesty there that Neil Lennon brings to the table. Is that eventually just going to end to him walking away from the job if he feels that maybe the board won't actually make the decision, and he is a deeply honest man, as you say, that he might actually just walk himself?
Well, he did the first time. He got frustrated in his first incarnation as Celtic manager, frustrated with the board that they weren't backing him in the transfer market. And there's a shelf life as well, I think, for Celtic managers under that kind of intensity. So he just kind of, he left. This time, I don't know. I mean, if the moment comes and he leaves, I think it will be presented that he's resigned. It nearly always is at Celtic. They have this thing that, they don't sack managers. Actually, they do sack managers. I mean, it's just nonsense. I can't see him, I would say I can't see him resigning, actually resigning rather than being resigned. But because I think Neil Lennon is the type of guy who absolutely believes that he can get this right. And he's a bit of a warrior, has been his whole career, and he's the type to be carried out in his shield. That would be my suspicion that if and when the end comes, that Peter Lawwell and Dermot Desmond will say, look, Neil, it's over, and it'll be presented that he has resigned. I wouldn't entirely discount the notion that he'll turn it around, but the likelihood of that is becoming less and less. I mean, you look at the defence, they're conceding 2 goals a game. The crisis of confidence in the side is huge. Their big players are not performing. Their captain, Scott Brown, doesn't deserve his place in the team, and there's all drama around that in itself. So he's an awful lot of things to fix, and he doesn't have a whole lot of time.
What actually happened? How did a 9-in-a-row team suddenly become a team that is incapable of playing to the standards that they've set for themselves over the previous 9 seasons?
It's a great question, and there's not just one answer. I think they come into Celtic fans have been singing "Here We Go 10 in a row" for about 4 or 5 years. They've taken great joy in mocking Rangers, who have been, in despair for a long time and now are back. So I think an awful lot of the Celtic fans psychologically had achieved the 10 in a row in their own heads. It was just a matter of ticking a box, ticking through the titles, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think maybe some of the Celtic players maybe thought that too. Certainly there was a complacency at the start of the season. They didn't have that edge. They didn't have the confidence. Then the defence started leaking goals. And that became a huge issue, and is still a huge issue. The amount of goals, and like ridiculously bad goals the Celtic are giving away, is extraordinary. That panic has set throughout set off problems elsewhere in the middle of the park. They're not doing it. Edouard, their main goal scorer, best player of last season, looks like he wants to leave. A few other players look like they want to leave. Scott Brown is not doing it in the middle of the park. The goalkeeper situation is terrible. The signings have been really bad. Shane Duffy, on the face of it, what Celtic needed was a big, belligerent, no-nonsense centre half, a bit of a roughhouse. They thought they'd got that in Shane Duffy. He's been embarrassingly exposed. He's been awful. So the signings have been bad as well. You know, it's a load of different things. You know, you look at a guy like Christopher Ayer, centre half, really fancies himself, was linked with AC Milan earlier in the season. I think Christopher Ayer thinks he's an AC Milan player. He looks like a Ragball Rovers player at the moment. I think he's a guy who's got great notions about himself. So it could be 10 or 12 different things. And it amounts to, and Neil Lennon's coaching as well, maybe that's not as good, as sharp as it used to be. 10 or 12 different things that have amounted to this. And this ain't good.
If there is a ceremonial shield carrying moment and he leaves, who is waiting in the wings, or what would the succession plan look like?
Well, that's part of the issue. That doesn't look like a succession plan. I mean, there wasn't a succession plan to Brendan Rodgers. Everybody knew, and I'm in and out of his press conferences a lot, and Brendan Rodgers was swearing undying loyalty to Celtic, would walk across broken glass to be manager of Celtic, all that usual rubbish, right? But the first opportunity he got to go to a decent job, he was up and left, and his undying loyalty, hey, guess what? It didn't turn out to be that undying. And they didn't have a succession plan. They knew that was coming, but they didn't have a succession plan. So the emergency option was Neil Lennon, who jumped into the position. They don't have anybody. They still don't have a succession plan. There is, I think, part of the reason why it's partly loyalty to Neil Lennon from Desmond and from Peter Lawwell, the chief executive. But it's also, I think, they can't find anyone else. I mean, if they bring somebody in, and there's obsession about this 10 in a row. I mean, this is suffocating the club, suffocating the support. They have to get the 10 in a row. If they bring somebody in a short-term measure, Gordon Strachan has been mentioned. Fans don't want him. Eddie Howe has been mentioned. Why would Eddie Howe parachute himself into this situation? Any guy who comes up now, if Neil Lennon is sacked, any guy who comes in now, it's 10 in a row or it's abuse from the fans. Not too many decent managers are going to sign up for that. So they're kind of in a bit of a logjam. They're betting everything. They're going all in on Neil Lennon turning this around because they don't have another plan.
How is this going to damage Neil Lennon's legacy as a beloved figure of Celtic FC?
I don't think it will. You know, if he's sacked or if he resigns at the weekend, all of the vitriol and all of the hate that we're seeing from pockets of the fans, that will likely disappear. And this is the kind of essential hypocrisy of it now. And they'll say, oh, you know, they'll eulogize him. Say, oh, what a great servant he was, but, you know, we have to move on. This is what happens. The revisionism is huge. I mean, we're seeing a little bit of revisionism now for Brendan Rodgers, a guy they adored, worshipped. He worshipped at the altar of St. Brendan. And then when he left, the vitriol towards Rodgers was unbelievable. I mean, understandable, because he swore he would be there for 10 in a row and all the rest of it. But you can see that a bit, that's turning now, because they're saying, why can't Neil Lennon be more like Brendan Rodgers? You know, so football fans in this situation, they twist their thinking any which way that suits them. That's why they're called fickle.
Yeah, look, we're out of time. You've been great with yours, but last question: do you think they will turn it around? Like, at this stage, you've got to make Rangers massive odds-on favourites to win this thing.
Yeah, you do. You do, and they are. Do I see them turning it around? I don't, no. I think it's too far gone. The defence is too bad. The confidence is too low. There's too many problems to fix, and Rangers are too strong. I don't know when the Lee Lennon era will end, but I think it will probably end. He's a battler. Like, he's a very impressive guy, and I'm kind of rooting for him, because I think he's put up with so much in Glasgow, so much sectarian hatred over the years. You're rooting for him, but I can't see it.
Yeah. Tom, great stuff. Thanks a million. Always great to chat to you. Cheers.
Cheers, lads.
It's really interesting stuff there from Tom English, talking to us about a range of different things, including Brett Gosper and Scottish rugby, but ultimately about Celtic. 087 918 180 is the number. Your stickers come out now much better than they did when you were down in Kerry. You can hear them. Do you know that?
We're into like month 18 of that number, I think it is.
Is it that long?
It probably is.
OTB Am is live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. We will just tell you about this. It is our poll. So support for Harry Byrne has come bubbling up. Harry Byrne is now at 30%. 45% of you want to see Joey Carberry as the long-term successor at number 10 for Ireland to Johnny Sexton. Ross Byrne at 13.8 and Billy Burns. I guess we have 10% of Ulster listeners.
It's extraordinary, really, that Harry Byrne's got 30% of that vote. It really does show the opinion that's out there for him, that's the hope that a lot of people have for him as well. But again, it comes back to what we were saying earlier on. A bit more time in the green jersey, and you actually start to make a few senior test appearances. Maybe that enthusiasm wanes because it's tough. It's tough there. And like Sexton obviously needed a bit of patience at the start. This is going to be a similar situation. Like, it's no surprise to see Joey Carberry there and 45% of the vote. There's a similar tone to that as well, that absence makes the heart grow fonder a little bit, but he was still sensational when he was playing over the last couple of years. And I think really, if you can take everybody fully fit, the stupid assumption that everybody's going to be fully fit at some point in the future,
yeah,
he's definitely number one.
It never happens, though, that everybody's going to be fully fit at the same time. And I think that's the other point about team selection. It's like, oh, wait till we get our full team out. It's international rugby. You never get your full team out. That Ben Healy story that's been bubbling up over the last few days, I mean, potentially it's just great work by an agent trying to get the best contract for a 21-year-old. But if Glasgow have genuinely made an approach for him and said, look, we see your future at 10 for Scotland and here's a bunch of money now, then you have to think about it, right? Especially if it looks like there's a few serious blockages in your way at your current club.
Yeah, definitely have to think about that move that comes your way. You're trying to think, if you're in Noosa Orr's shoes, how do you prevent this from happening? If you think that Healy is a potential star in that position, do you look around at the other provinces and try and manufacture a move?
No, he wants to play for Munster. I kind of agree with Gordon Darcy that, like, if you can get the players to move province when they leave school and into the academy, fair enough. So maybe that's when you have your draft. And like, maybe Caelan Doris should have been drafted by Connacht, given that he has some Connacht links, and like then he comes up playing for Connacht, as opposed to everybody now assuming that he's a Leinster player and can never move. But I do think that the provincial identities, like that tribalism, was ultimately the engine that got Irish rugby up and running. And maybe we don't need it anymore. Maybe it's fine. Maybe you don't care about the fact that Ulster are essentially a Leinster B team with a few Ulster Academy players.
Well, then here's the question. If we properly care about keeping Ben Healy in Ireland, then a conversation needs to be happening right now about how do you get Joey Carberry and Healy into the same team.
Yeah,
because that is going to be the only sustainable way of allowing this to happen.
And it turns out there's loads of really easy and great ways to do that, where Joey Carberry plays centre or Joey Carberry plays fullback. Like,
but then can he be Ireland's 10 then if he's playing in those positions?
Well, maybe Ben Healy's your 10
for Munster.
Yes, you can if you're that good. If we think he's as good as we think he is, But
what if Joey Carberry isn't anywhere near as good at playing midfield or at fullback as he is as a out half? Like, clearly he's been brilliant in that position, especially in Munster colours, in my opinion. Is there a case that, okay, there might be the greater good for having them both on the same pitch at the same time, but for the best version of Joey Carberry, you need him playing at 10. Will we get to a position where he is going to be Ireland's first choice 10? There could well be, there is definitely a world where that's the case in the next couple of years. So then there'll be a conflict again between province and nation, and can you have your starting out half for Ireland playing in a different position for his province? Maybe you can, but definitely I think that the only sustainable way to make this story go away and also stay true to his Munster loyalties is to find a way in the team for Healy and Carbery together, unless Joey Carbery goes back to Leinster.
Also a possibility. 25 minutes past 9 here this morning on OTB Am. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be helping you out with your Christmas shopping. It is Christmas book season buying guide, and I'm delighted to say, friend of the show, Donn McClean, is with us this morning to talk to us about his young adult novel. It's called All to Play For. Donn, good morning to you. How are you?
Hi, Ger. I'm very well, thanks. Good to chat. Thanks for having me.
Congratulations on the book. It's been a while. It's been in the oven for a while.
It had, yeah. Look, it's a book that's been somewhere in the recesses of my mind, Ger, for years. And yeah, just in chatting to O'Brien Press about a couple of different things, it came up, and they said, "Sure, look, write some of it, and we'll have a look." So we got on with it, and yeah, no, thank God they liked it, and yeah, it's out there. So hopefully other people will like it too.
So it's about a 13-year-old. Her name is Anna. She's struggling to cope with the recent loss of her father when she discovers a forgotten gift from him. A pair of bright orange football socks, and this takes her on a journey.
That's it. Yeah, no, it's yeah. Look, she's a good Gaelic football player, and then, as you say, Ger, her dad has a fatal accident, and before, on the day that he had the accident, he gave her a pair of orange socks. She had county trials the following day. And he said, "Look, these socks, not only will they make you play the best football you've ever played in your life, but they'll make you stand out to the selectors. So you won't be the girl in the dark curly hair. You'll be the girl in the orange socks." So and then her dad dies, and the socks go missing. They move house, so she has to cope with all of that, moving school, starting a new school, and she starts playing football again with a new club. So she has to deal with getting into a new club, playing with girls she doesn't know, who are also girls with whom she's going to school. And then down the road a little bit, she discovers the socks again. And when she wears them, she kind of feels a comfort. She and her dad had a pre-match routine that they always used to do, and she couldn't do it, obviously, after he died. But when she has the socks on, she just feels that he's some kind of a presence there. And the ball tends to hop her way as well when she's wearing the socks, and she discovers her footballing ability. She went for a while with having no interest in football, no interest in school, no interest in anything after her dad died. But then she kind of gradually gets it back and gradually gets into the team. And she has a couple of other difficulties with the team. There's a very strong player in the team who doesn't make her life easy, and she's the manager's daughter. But she kicks on, and Anna, she's an amalgam of lots of different things, Jerry. She's strong, but she's also vulnerable and anxious and confident at the same time in different ways. And it's for her, she's at her most comfortable in her new environment when she's on the football pitch, because on the football pitch, she reckons cliques don't matter. It doesn't matter who you know or how good you are or what car your dad drives or what clothes you wear. Everybody's the same when they're on the football pitch.
Yeah, so a lot of universal themes there. It turns out you can't write this stuff unless there's a little bit of you in it as well. You can't just like bang this stuff out. So how much of you and your own family's situation is in this book about a 13-year-old?
I'd say quite a lot, Jared. There's probably a small 13-year-old in most of us. Yeah, look, my I suppose it is that there's a little bit of me in it, all right. My mother died when I was a kid, so there's a wee bit of that. And then we have 4 girls, as you know, Jared. And they're all into sport. Now they're not all into Gaelic football. They're common, like one of them is into Gaelic football and soccer, another's into soccer and hockey, another's into hockey and golf, and our eldest is just all in on hockey. So it's not all about Gaelic football in this house, but it is about sport. And it's brilliant that, you know, with 4 girls that Sunday mornings and Saturday morning, they're all about gear. We're like, somebody wore somebody's top last week and put it in the wash. And they can't find it. There's bedlam, and in one sense, it makes for a lively house, but in another, it's brilliant. It's just great that they're all out there playing football, and I suppose there's a wee bit of all 4 of them in Anna, Ger, because you know you kind of and maybe my relationship with all 4 of them as well, and I coach one of their teams as well. So yeah, it's I suppose, as you say, Ger, you can't write about what you don't know about, and I suppose there's a wee bit of all of them in Anna, I think.
And did they like the book, most importantly? Were they your test audience the whole way through?
They were. It was chapter by chapter. And they were a brilliant sounding board as well, because I've written how I think a 13-year-old thinks or how I think a 13-year-old speaks. And they go, Dad, there's no way Anna would say that. She wouldn't say it like that. She'd say it like this. And there's a half a chapter on Minecraft in it, of all things. And I thought, I know all about Minecraft, so I was able to write it no problem. But actually, they told me I wrote it nearly like a Minecraft manual, and there were loads of mistakes in it. So no, they changed all that for me. So no, they've been brilliant. And yeah, it was so they'd read the chapter when I'd finish it, and then they'd be dying for the next chapter to come along. So yeah, no, it's a story that evolved as well, Joe, when I sat down to write it, because you have an idea in your head where the story will go, and it followed the broad parameters of that story, but there are little twists and turns in it along the way that I hadn't anticipated in the beginning. But just as the story developed and as the characters developed, I was happy to go wherever they took me.
Yeah, and again, like quite heavy themes. The theme of grief for a child who is bereaved. That must have been difficult for you to revisit in some ways, and I guess you wouldn't have done it unless you wanted to as well.
Well, that's it. Yeah. No, I suppose it was a little bit cathartic, as I was saying to Tommy there earlier on. And for me, when I was growing up, it was all Gaelic football. It was all we played. It was all we could play. There was no soccer, no other sports for boys. And for girls to play sport was unusual. So it's great. Excuse me. It's great that these days girls have so many opportunities to play sports. But yeah, I suppose there was a little bit of that in me, and revisiting that and kind of remembering how it was, growing up, and kind of imagining as well how it would be for the four girls if God forbid anything were to happen to me. So there's probably a wee bit of that in it as well, and you kind of hope, I suppose, that you'll be remembered in some way along the way if that was to happen, or if that time comes.
Is this the first time you've written about a theme like this, Donn? Has it been a while coming for this catharsis, basically?
That's it. Yeah, exactly. I've ghostwritten autobiographies, but it's my first fiction book, first book for young adults as well. So a lot of firsts in there, Tommy. I loved it. I loved writing it. I get up and get into the office at 5 a.m. to try and get writing before all the lights were switched on. And I loved that part of the day, just kind of settling down with your thoughts and letting the story roll away. So. Yeah, no, it's been a good process for me. I've enjoyed writing it. Just hope people enjoy reading it now.
And what has the response been like? I'm always really interested to kind of see that you stick a book out there and then you start talking about it. This is the other part of it, like where you kind of live with it now for a long time as well. So what's that like?
Yeah, that's it. Look, most of what I've heard has been very positive, Jared. Thankfully, people have liked it, and friends of the girls have read it. They liked it, and even parents of friends of the girls have read it. They've liked it too. So I'm sure people who haven't liked it, they just haven't told me that they didn't like it.
Well, look, the timing is great. The 20 by 20 campaign, it's exactly the type of, if you can't see it, you can't be it. It's a book about a 13-year-old playing Gaelic football despite all of the rest of the stuff that's going on in a 13-year-old's life, and some extra stuff layered on. So congratulations on that. And as if you weren't busy enough, Donn, you've got a picture book out as well with Pat Healy, the photographer, the racing photographer that people will be familiar with. He's taken some of the most iconic photographs in world sport.
Yeah, Pat's a brilliant photographer, Ger, as you know, and yeah, he's done his book with O'Brien Press as well, and he just asked me to write the words for it, the captions, and the kind of some of the backgrounds to the stories. So yeah, that's out. But look, that's Pat Healy's book. It's a photograph book, and it's some of the photographs in it are stunning, and it captures a decade of Irish racing, Irish national hunt racing, all the way through the 2010s. And yeah, look, I suppose the difficulty with that book, Ger, was in deciding what photographs to leave out. There were so many fantastic photographs in it, so I was delighted to collaborate with Pat on that one and with the O'Brien Press.
Well, listen, best of luck, Donn. Happy Christmas to you and yours. It's called All to Play For, and it comes wholeheartedly recommended by everybody here at Team OTB. Thanks a million, Donn.
Thanks a million, Ger.
Cheers. That's again, we'll be recommending some other books for you over the next while for the sports fan or sports lover in your life. If you have any book recommendations that you'd like to get into us that might help stuff out a Christmas stocking or two, now would be a good time to do it. 0879 180 180. You can just about get delivery for another week or two, I think, and be confident enough that it's going to arrive.
Well, yeah, it depends where you order from, obviously. I've got a book on the way at the moment that I've been waiting for about 3.5 months. So, Ger's advice is somewhat sketchy on that front, but most good Irish bookshops will have you covered in the next while.
Yeah, shop local if you can.
Yeah, you see, that's the problem. I didn't shop local, and this is what I get. This is what I get for giving money to Jeff Bezos, and
Well, yeah, okay. What weird manga have you ordered from the moon that has taken 3 weeks to arrive?
It's actually a sports book. Wait till next year by the two authors, Goodman and I can't remember the co-author. There are basically 4 or 5 different books with the exact same title, and this is definitely the correct one. And the seller, has been on to me saying, yeah, sorry about that. We can give you a refund, but we think we might get it to you in, the next year.
Right, they sent you the wrong ones a couple of times, did they?
No.
Okay.
Nothing has arrived, but they've been apologising, saying you can have your refund. And I'm like, no, I don't want my refund. I'm happy enough to wait endlessly. Kind of like the Escobar meme where he's just staring into empty space. That is me beside my letterbox every single morning. Very
good. Right, tomorrow's show, Kieran Donaghy and Jim McGuinness together. Alan Quinlan, our GAA quick picks and much more as well. OTB Am live every weekday from 7:30 until 10 o'clock. Thanks to Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. We've already spoken a bit of rugby on the show this morning. We had Gordon Darcy with us a little bit later on. If you missed that, you can get it on the OTB Rugby stream. You just subscribe to our podcast feed on the OTB Sports app. That's the best place to listen to it. It gets there fastest. Let's hear, though, from Matt Williams, who was chatting with Will last night about the state of Irish rugby. This is pretty blistering stuff from Matt, so stay tuned for 20 minutes of download from Matty Williams' brain.
It is time for Wednesday night rugby. We're joined by former Leinster and Ulster coach Matt Williams to have a look ahead to the final weekend of the Autumn Nations Cup and where Ireland have been going. Jonathan Sexton pretty insistent at his press conference yesterday that Ireland are making improvements and that they're in a better spot than when they were in 2019, admitting that they are at a lower level than 2018. Matt, what's your read on what Sexton had to say? I mean, we've had 8 games now under Andy Farrell in this calendar year. Have you seen any kind of tangible improvements in the Irish team compared to where they were on the back of the World Cup last year?
Very hard to be definitive with where they are. I think the one thing we have to take into account is the players are inside a real bubble, and not a criticism in any way of the players. It's just the reality. But if you read Robbie Kearney's book, Robbie's a wonderful guy who I've got huge respect for. I did some shows with him on Virgin Media. He's a great guy, wonderful career. But he was saying it wasn't until the England game before they left for the World Cup they realised they were in trouble. Now, to most of us on the outside of that team in 2019, we knew they were in trouble from March. So the players, hear the talks, they see it all, but sometimes they don't see the reality until it's actually happened. So I've got no doubt that what Johnny's saying is something he really believes. I have great concerns for the team. I really, that England performance was absolutely horrific. I've got to say that's the term, horrific. I think it was 227 times Irish players ran into English defenders and got tackled. I mean, they've lost the game. Like, if you do it 227 times, you win by 4 tries. Okay, we can understand that stat. But to have that number and only score your first points very late in the game and by a kick over the top, no clean break, I mean, that tells you where they are with attack. And really what I see with that team is that they're trying to play the same game plan, roughly, that they did in 2018, and it's just never going to work again. The game's moved on. The game changes and develops and tactics change. That's just always been part of rugby, and it's moved on. Now, Andy Farrell was put there as a continuous coach, a continuity coach from Joe, and there's merit in that. And when the appointment was made, okay, the decision was, let's keep doing what we're doing is great, let's keep doing it. And now that ain't working. So they've got to come up with another plan. If they come out with the same plan against Scotland and they get tackled 150, 160 times and they shut down Sexton and they shut down Bundyaki or whoever's playing as the first receiver behind him, that's not good at all.
Yeah, because I think the concern about last week on the back of Twickenham, and notwithstanding that 10 new players have won their first caps this year and there has been a bit of change in personnel, there was no real change in style for the Georgia game. It was back to the same old reliable running into traffic, getting into a ruck, resetting, then running it down the middle again. There was no real expansive side against a team who kind of lap up that kind of pressure with the physicality that Georgia have, and Ireland seemed to have no ingenuity to try and work the ball wide at all.
No, it's like that they've got just one game plan. I very much agree with that. And it was an abysmal game to watch. It was really hard to watch. Really, really tough viewing, you know. The highlight was the Georgian inside centre's 50-metre try. Now, when that's the highlight and you're supporting Ireland, that's not good. But, yeah, look, there's two arguments there. One, they wanted to go out and stick to the game plan they're going to use later on. Now, that's always going to beat Georgia. It's going to beat Wales, because Wales have really declined since the World Cup. Lost a lot of people, guys retiring, new coaching staff, and things aren't going well with that. Things are not going well there at all. So let's say we're going to beat Wales, and we're playing at home. So Ireland at home are playing efficiently. But when they're going away, or they're playing England, the big teams, England, France, I would put New Zealand and South Africa in that, and Australia are edging there. I don't know, we're not really quite sure where Australia are under Dave Rennie, their new coach. They had a magnificent win over New Zealand, a gutsy draw, and then two horrific losses. So I'm not really sure where Australia are, but they're there or thereabouts. Let's just say they're about equal with Ireland. The game plan they're currently playing isn't going to beat those big sides. It's just not going to work. So they've got to, and what does that mean? Another quarterfinal exit. So they've got to come up and develop and grow a plan that maximises the talent of that team. Right now, there's like the old Joe Schmidt vision plus a little bit by Mike Catt, and they're trying to squash the Irish talent into that mould, and that's not going to work. They've got to find a way. What is the best system? How can we play to maximise the talents of our James Ryan, maximise the talents of our new players like Ronan Kelleher and so on? How are we going to maximise that? And then they're going to have to decide who is going to people it. What are they going to do about the 9 and 10 situation? You know, Johnny Sexton, the way the other 10s are playing, Johnny Sexton can sign another contract and play till he's 40. Now, that's because there's no one else to take his place. Now, Johnny's not getting any better. He's getting older. That's just the way of us all. Not a criticism of Johnny. Again, huge respect. He's one of the Irish all-time greats. But none of us get better as players once we're past 32, 33. You're hanging on. You're in a little bit of decline with pace. And the other part is because Ireland have played the same way, they figured out, you know, stop Sexton, you stop Ireland. So that Georgian game, you know, in some ways was a lost opportunity. I know they blooded a lot of new guys, and often that's very hard. You lose continuity. But you didn't come out of that game feeling like they'd really progressed.
When it comes to Johnny Sexton's contract situation, he's now 35, so he'll be well into the back end of his 30s by the time that the World Cup comes around in France. And all these questions came up when he was appointed as the captain last year too for the start of this season. He's still in a pretty strong position to get that contract. I mean, what's very different to the Donnacha-Ryan situation is that there were a string of locks coming through at the same time, and the RFU could use his age as a reason not to hand out a new deal. But even at this point, Matt, at the end of 2020, there's no clear number 2 out half. Joey Carberry's injury, we're not sure what's going to happen. Ross Byrne has had a tough time in the games that he's got to start for Ireland so far. Billy Burns is very green. Jack Carthy hasn't really worked out. He's now back with Connacht. Harry Byrne is currently part of the squad. We're not quite sure what he's going to do at international level. To me, it would seem that Johnny Sexton is still in a pretty strong negotiating position when he sits down with the RFU.
Yeah, he is. There's just no one else right now. And that's the reality. You know, I got a text from, it was a private text, I won't mention the names, a leading Irish ex-international. It just said Johnny can play till he's 50, because there's no one else. Look, Johnny, and so he should. He's still very fit, very healthy. Johnny's not playing poorly. I think the leadership is a different role. I think the leadership of James Ryan needs to be encouraged and brought through. I think that's essential. I think the captaincy time for Johnny is over. I think he was rewarded with a captaincy from his great loyalty, but I don't necessarily think he's a great captain. He's a leader. But, you know, just the fact he lost his temper getting substituted, you know, you can't come out on the Friday and say, we've got a great coaching team, we've got a great spirit, we're doing everything, and then you get substituted and you do your nana coming off the field. Not everyone's a captain. That doesn't take away from Sexton's leadership. I do think it's time for a new captain. I do think for the longevity where we are, we're 2 and a bit years out from the next World Cup, so that time to blood that is now. And I think that will also take some pressure off Johnny, and that will extend his career as a player when that pressure's taken away. So that is a truthful thing. The thing I think Johnny's got to come to terms with, and all the players do in the COVID era, is when their contracts come up, there's going to be haircuts. You know, they're not going to get the money that they were getting. Everyone around the world has got that. So I think it's also a different market. I know the money in Europe, in France, is not what it was. People are talking some talk, but I've heard from very, very well-informed sources that there's been serious cuts in budgets at the vast majority of clubs, if not all of them.
Yeah, because David Nucifora was pretty honest about this on Monday morning when he was asked about the potential of Irish players leaving. And he was saying, look, the pot is likely to be reduced in terms of the money, a haircut, as you said, in terms of the contracts. There's a lot of high-profile players who are into the last 2 years of their current deals. When they sit down for negotiating, maybe some of the bumper contracts that were available before aren't going to be there if the RFU are going to turn in a 30 million loss next summer, which they're projecting. But unless they go to a sugar daddy club in England, in all likelihood, there's probably not going to be huge contracts on offer elsewhere.
I completely concur with that. I think the players just have to face reality, like all of us around the world. Everyone involved in rugby around the world has had a reduction in their wages. That's just a fact. I certainly know in Australia it's worse than that. A lot of guys lost their jobs. Certainly professional clubs here in France have reduced their numbers from maybe 42 down to 45, down to 32, and putting some a lot more development guys getting time in off the bench in certain games, academy kids getting time in certain games. So if you multiply that around the top 14, let's say it's 10 guys in each club's been cut, it's 140 guys that are gone. And that goes down to second division in England as well. Now, a lot of those clubs, their sugar daddies are taking a hit as well. So if you're, for example, if you're at one of the clubs where they're involved with the airlines or they're involved with travel, they're not going to be taking anything. Plus, if you're involved with a club that's major sponsor as a car sponsor, like Toulouse, who are major sponsor as Peugeot, I mean, the car sales have plummeted in the last 6 months. So you just can't see all of these guys getting big money. Of course, there's going to be one or two that will attract big money, and they may choose to do that for a few years, and good on them. That's part of life experience. I don't have any problem with a player doing that. I think that's the wonderful part of rugby, to go to a different part of the world and live and experience it. If you get a few quid while you're at it, well, good luck to you. No problems with it at all. But I think the reality for every rugby professional in the world coming into signing a contract now, or even on contract, is that you will have a much lesser wage going forward, because your employers, the unions, have lost tens of millions of dollars, euros, dollars, pounds, wherever you are. They've lost a lot of money, and that's got to be passed down the chain. That's just the way the business works.
Yeah, breakdown of the players who are currently into the last 12 months of their contract and who will be going into negotiations with the RFU in the new year. You've got Peter O'Mahony, CJ Stander, Tyg Furlong, Keith Earls, Johnny Sexton, Cian Healy and Ian Henderson, all pretty much core players that will be starting week on week for Ireland if an ideal 15 was picked in all likelihood. But when it comes to where they're going to go in terms of the next step on this one, Matt, Dave Nucifora again was quite clear that they won't be changing their policy in terms of picking players who are outside of the provinces. They're still going to prioritise. They say this isn't a rule that they're likely to change. I'm sure that's still something that's playing in the back of the minds of any of those frontline Irish players currently. They want to continue playing for their country. If they want to do so, they're re-signing with their province.
Exactly. I think a few of those players who are in their 30s, perhaps Peter and Keith, who are fantastic servants of Irish rugby and Munster rugby, I think they're the ones I'd be concerned about, because I think what Nucifora and the RFU understandably are pushing the contract negotiations back. I don't think they know how much income they're going to get next year. I think there's some talk the Six Nations will be pushed back. I don't know how they'll do that with rescheduling other games and other competitions, but that's very strong talk around the traps. No more than talk, but there is talk that will be pushed back to April and May, so that they can get some bums on seats, so they can get some paying customers in to the matches, so they can make some more money. All totally understandable and very business wise, very understandable from the unions, and no one would speak against that. But until they know how much money they're going to get, they're going to be very reluctant to commit themselves to wages. And some of the older players, as is the nature of the game, might find themselves on the wrong side of that. Now, they're the guys that might go to Europe, or they'll be put on highly incentivised contracts. Okay, we'll pay you much less, but if you get picked for Ireland, we'll pay you this and this and this. There's a whole lot of ways to skin the cat. But that group of players are certainly not going to be getting the value they got before. Now, whether they decide, okay, my days wearing the green jersey are over and I'm ready to go overseas, that's totally up to them. But I also don't criticise the union for doing that. As much as I'd love to have seen Simon Zebo playing fullback for Ireland, their job is to protect the quality of the product in Ireland. And the Irish product, as far as clubs go, is still up there with the best in Europe. Leinster and Munster are still fighting. Connacht and Ulster are doing very, very well. Ulster in particular this season had a great start. That's their job, is to protect their organisation. And by saying, if you go overseas, you don't play for Ireland, they're doing that. So I've got no problems with that. And it's free. They're not saying to players you can't go overseas. They're saying if you do, this is a consequence. Australia do the same thing, and New Zealand do the same thing. Now, they have Australia have what they call a Giddo rule, was made for Matt Giddo. If once you play 80 tests, then if you go overseas, you can come back. The Curtly Beale currently playing here in France. Technically, they could do that with Curtly. I don't think they ever will. But that's what they could do in that circumstance. Now, Ireland haven't brought that in, but I think that's something they should do. So someone, say, like Peter O'Mahony, who's been a wonderful servant to Irish rugby, maybe he's at his vintage, and after all the games he has given, and Keith Earls, they could be allowed to play overseas but come back and play for Ireland, but the younger guys can't. They would be very valid arguments for me for going forward with how you organise the playing group.
And I'd imagine, Matt, as well, when it comes to the quality of teams that the provinces are going to face, they probably can't wait until the potential expansion of a Pro 16 in a couple of years' time, with the big South African sides coming in, like the Bulls and like the Stormers, and potentially frontline South African internationals playing in the Pro Rugby system. I would imagine when you look at the results the provinces have had so far this year, they really can't wait for those South African teams to come in and push up the standard of the Pro 16.
Oh, yeah. It's just been... It's not good for Irish rugby. Winning like this is not good for the teams. Leinster just don't seem to have any competition, even when they're putting out part of their second and third 15. It's just quite staggering that these great clubs that we're playing against have dropped their standards so much. Let me tell you, when the South Africans come in, it'll be a rude awakening. I mean, they're good teams. They're big men. They're good teams. They play great rugby. I've been watching a little bit of the Curry Cup, not following it avidly, but I've been watching a little bit, and the standard of play is exceptionally good, exceptionally good. They are playing really high-quality rugby, very similar to the way the New Zealand provinces would play. It's great to watch. It's plenty of ball movement, and they will be a handful. And the quicker they come in, as you say, the better. I think the other side of that is there has to be pressure put on the Welsh and the Scots, not so much the Italians, but to a lesser degree the Italians, but they've got to pick their game up. They just have to pick their game up and not come out when Ireland are putting out Leinster and these teams, putting up such poor, not poor sides, but such undermanned side compared to their first 15, and they're still coming up with the goods. These other sides have just got to lift their game, coaching-wise and player development-wise. It's not good for the competition in any way.
When it comes to this weekend, Matt, Scotland have had a pretty miserable run in Dublin going back over 9 years now. But realistically, I was at the game at the Aviva back in the Six Nations. If Stuart Hogg keeps his eye on the ball and gets that grounded, Scotland could well have won that game. And that was a Scotland team without Finn Russell. How much of a danger do Scotland pose to Ireland this coming weekend?
I think they pose a real danger. First of all, we have to just say Ireland at home are very good. I think it's 19 games now on the trot. That they're very good at home. So we've got to give Ireland a lot of credit for how they defend Fortress Aviva. They do it very well. But the last two times that the Scots have come to the Aviva, they have lost the game rather than Ireland have won the game. The Scots self-implode quite often in Dublin. There was a number of times there 2 years ago, that was at 2017, I think it was, or 2018. 2018. They just threw the ball away time and time again when they had overlaps. There was one time Stuart Hogg was coming down the wing and they were just going to score a try and just passes didn't go where they should have. Now, the other part is I think the Scots have improved. They've certainly improved their defence. They're still not a top-class, top 5 international team, but they are much more cohesive and they are playing to their strengths. They are defending to their strengths, which is a lot of credit to Gregor Townsend, their coach. In other words, he's doing what I've suggested Ireland need to do. He's got a plan that suits them and they're playing something that suits them. Now, there's a bit of an unfortunate side to that. Last game the Scots played, Stuart Hogg, who is a brilliant attacking fullback, every time he got the ball, he kicked it. He didn't run once, which I think is wrong. I think they've got to change that. But they are rather than just being a team that passes and passes, they're bringing in a counter-kicking game, which is smart, but to kick every single time is not smart. There has to be some variation in that. But the Scots have improved, and they will test Ireland this week, and that will be very good for Ireland. That will be really helpful for them going forward to be pushed at the Aviva.
And on a very final note for you, Matt, how seriously do Ireland take this? Because Keith Wood was saying on Monday Night Rugby he wasn't sure how serious Ireland are taking this competition, and that maybe played somewhat into the lacklustre display against Georgia last week. Do Ireland take this seriously at the weekend?
Gee, this is the first time in about 10 years I'm going to find myself disagreeing with Keith Wood, which is nice. Woody, if you're listening there, I've always agreed with this. We think about the game very similarly. I don't think there's any time you pull on your national jersey where you're not taking it seriously. And you pull on your national jersey and you run out on your home ground and you're playing against Scotland. Look, you don't want to lose that game. You go to Twickenham the other week. They tried their guts out. You couldn't fault their effort. It was mindless and repetitive, but you couldn't fault their effort. It's very hard to get up for games like Georgia. I understand that, but I don't think it's not the World Cup. Don't get me wrong. I understand where it is in the rankings of how the competitions go. But I also think that Ireland will not want to lose this game. I don't think it's going to be the same intensity as we're used to the Six Nations games because there's no crowd and so on. But I still think they'll be wanting to go out there and give their best and win. Because if they don't win, wow, people are coming for them. That would be a disaster if they don't win for their staff and the players.
Yeah, third place on the line this weekend at the Aviva Stadium when Ireland play against Scotland.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, your most supported hour from